ICQ Podcast, episode 326, The Futures of Amateur Radio. Well, hello and welcome, fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, to this, our 326th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Kevin Sherlock, November 3, Kilo Alpha, Michael Street, Golf 3, Juliet Kilo Kilo, Lizzie Cannon, Golf 0, Mike Delta Lima, and Billy Kemp, and of course our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1RB is joined by Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Ed, DD5, Lima Papa, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3, Bravo, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature by Frank, K4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, in relation to the futures of ham radio. Well, I'm sure it hasn't escaped your attention the very kind donations we've received this episode, so we'd like to pass on our thanks to them. We start with Kevin, November 3, Kilo Alpha, and he says, thanks for the hundreds of hours of entertainment. I've listened to every episode at this point. 73 from Kevin. So Kevin, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much for your generous donation. We move on to Michael Street, Golf 3, Juliet Kilo Kilo. And he says, keep up the good work, guys. 73s, so we will do. We have a donation from Billy Kemp. Not sure your call sign, Billy. Didn't get a message from you, but if you want to pop us a message, say we're more than welcome to give you a shout out in a future episode. So you just pop along to info@icqpodcast.com, fill out the contact us form, and we'll pop you into the next show. Now we've got a new subscription done as well, Lizzie Cannon, and Lizzie is Golf 0, Mike Delta, and she says, thanks for all the effort you put into making this great show. Look forward to meeting some of the team again at the next Canvey Island Rally in Essex in the UK. Stay safe, Lizzie, Golf 0, Mike Delta Lima. Thank you very much, guys, for those very kind donations. Now, as we always say, those donations, along with our monthly and subscription donors, go along to help pay our way. But they also help us as well to pay for some of the items that we need for running the podcast. And because of that wonderful showing, we'll be dispatching some new microphones to some of our roundtable presenters to help increase their audio quality to increase your enjoyment of the show. We'd ask you to consider, if you found any value and enjoyment in the show, to continue to support us. And you can do that the easiest way by visiting icqpodcast.com/donate. We'll say whatever you find value in the show, pop along to us, set up a subscription from as little as £1 a month. It's just over $1 a month, or as a one-off donation, and say that we pile back into the show and as say helps improve the audio and what we're working on here. So thank you again to everybody for helping us out this episode. Well, we've got a bit of a long show this episode, so I hope you're going to enjoy this during the continuation of the COVID lockdown. So we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Ed, Frank and Bill to discuss the latest amateur radio news, including record numbers take UK exam and moonbouncing with FT8. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, welcome to episode 326. And this episode's News Roundtable. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin. Evening, guys. Hope you're all having fun.
I think we are, and I think we're going to have a good one. We've also got Mr. Martin Rothwell, back from a short break. Nice to have you, Martin. M0SGL.
Hello. How are we all doing?
We're ducking and diving.
This is good.
As I say, good to have you back. Over in Germany, I've got Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Evening, all.
Evening, Ed. And as I say, it's still light over here in the UK. Is it still light in Germany?
No, it's nicely dark here. It's not pitch black yet, but it's getting there.
Okay, so we're working on it. And moving across the pond, we have Mr. Frank Howell. I should give you a correct title, really, Frank, shouldn't I? Like we did in the feature. Professor Frank Howell, K4FMH.
Well, I'm professing that I'm dancing in the streets and enjoying life. So it's part of that's being here on the podcast, guys.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Frank. And I know you enjoy life You and I get up to enough trouble when we're together, the same as Mr. Rothwell and I get into trouble. And Chris spends half his life trying to keep me under control.
And the other half of his life giggling to something inappropriate that you've just said.
I spent up my life failing to keep under control, Martin, let's be honest.
Yeah, failing to keep me under control, yeah. And last but not least, Mr. Bill Vance, WC3B, who has had to duck out for a business meeting at the moment, but may very well join us later in the podcast, hoping this business meeting doesn't run on too long.
He gave me his proxy welcome, so good evening, Martin.
Yeah.
It'd be online to talk about FT Stupid 8, no doubt.
FT Stupid 8.
Yeah. Bill will be back shortly. Okay, guys, let's start this record number to take UK Foundation exam. And now this is because it's happening online. There's a record number of 600 people that are booked slots to take their amateur radio exam during June. Absolutely fantastic. I managed to talk to somebody who took their exam online this morning on a repeater. Guy called Paul, M7, and please forgive me, I was driving so I didn't write your call sign down. But hopefully tomorrow, I've told him I'll be on the repeater about the same time or a little bit earlier. We might get some time to chat before I run out of range of the repeater. But Chris, what do you think about this? This is quite a number, 600 up from about 125.
That's a phenomenal number, and so we're just chatting before the show about why that might be. It might just be that people are at home and on lockdown and have got time to study and want to take the exam. It might just be that it's a bit more convenient now being able to do it from home, but it's phenomenal. And the RSGB are highlighting that they've now got a new booking system. Previously, I was approached by someone trying to take the online exams, even though they weren't for them, because that's what they were asked to do. They were asked to talk to the local club, even though we weren't really involved in any of the training or for the exams. And the RSGB have now amended that. They've now got an online booking process, and I think they're now starting to take bookings from the 1st of July. So I think they're just very, very, very busy. It's been a massive success, and that's good. And I think I also saw on one of the forums that they are thinking about, although they haven't got any dates yet, when they might start to also introduce the online exams or the remotely invigilated exams for the intermediate and full, which will mean we'll get even more people taking their exams. But it's been a great success. So well done to the RSGB.
Yeah, and it's pleasurable to see lots of people. And there are, in fairness, there are a lot of new M7 license holders about. And I think we're lucky. We've got 3 or 4 in our club at the moment who all seem to be very, very active. So even though they're starting the hobby late in life, they've been very, very active on that. So, Martin, you've not been around much, but go on, have a go. What do you think about this?
Well, I think it's unsurprising, as we mentioned, with everyone, either working from home or on lockdown, there's more people with more time to study, more people spending time learning their hobbies and things like that. That's great. The COVID-19, I hate to say it because every news story has, gone on and on and on about it. It's a horrible thing. But every cloud has a silver lining and stuff. And, in this case, it can only be good because it's forcing the likes of the RSGB to think of other ways to get people licensed, to get people on the air. The online thing can, if it's done right, and we've mentioned this on the show before, then it can only be a good thing. And if we're pushing forward for the intermediate and the advanced in that situation as well, I mentioned before that I had great trouble finding anywhere that would do the advanced course. So if things were online, to me, I'd have got my advanced license a lot sooner than I did. So by them being able to put this stuff online and people being able to take the exams online, if people are able to take the advanced course, I can only see this as a good thing. Say it's very unsurprising though that more people are doing it, and good luck to them and welcome to the airwaves.
Yeah, well, that's what I said to the gentleman I met this morning. I said, welcome to our hobby, and he was a bit taken back, but I think we have to welcome the new members into our hobby. So that's good. Ed, a long time ago, you and I sat the original City and Guilds RAE. So what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, just echoing a lot of what the others have said. that it's great news, and I think 600 slots is the absolute maximum that they can manage, because I believe they're all done individually. So each exam is one person, and then the invigilators remotely watching them while they go through the exam. So the maximum they can actually fit into 1 month is 600, and all of those slots for June are full. And it'll be interesting now they've got the new booking system in place, how long before July fills up. Previously, it was 120, an average of 125 a month, but now it seems to have shot up drastically. And as you said, we were discussing beforehand whether it was partially the people have time because of the lockdown, and also partially it could very well be that many people have wanted to take the exam, but the examination centres or the clubs running the exams have been, 100, 200 miles away, and they just haven't been able to find the time or the transport to get there. But now it's done online, it opens up more opportunities. So let's hope that is the case, because then that would mean that the number of people hopefully coming into the hobby, even after COVID has gone, is probably going to be more than it was before. That's what I hope, anyway.
Yeah. And also the other thing, and I think you kind of mentioned it, was that the exam centre's been on lockdown, so there would have been quite a backlog anyway. But to release the brakes and get 600, I think is really, really good. Frank, I know this is a UK story and you're on the other side of the pond. Are the ARRL doing anything similar, or what do you think of what's happening in the UK? What do you think of that?
Well, we certainly have the FCC endorsement and approval, and I think there's, it's sort of modestly getting started from the latest I've seen. I agree with what's been said about the RSGB efforts and the numbers. It's a bit like the python eating the elephant right now. The vacancy in time, which produces an opportunity to take the exam, is, fairly understandable. What I hope the RSGB will do is the thing that Ed touched on, is they will collect the data and look at the location of where some of the online test takers are located relative to their clubs. The RSGB has a nice Find a Club app with Google Maps. Where you want to find a club near you, you put in your postcode or what have you, and then it will come up with a map. Well, I hope they examine this sort of geographical propinquity issue and collect some data on it, because it will tell us that how many would-be hams are there, but they're just kind of geographically hamstrung. They don't have that social network with a nearby club, and so on and so on. So that's one of the bright spots I see in this, is after the python swallows the elephant, is there another smaller one perhaps coming down the pike, because there are people who just have been shut out before.
So I think it's interesting, Frank, and like I know you're interested in the data and where things and why things are happening, and I do hope that the data is collected and used in a sensible manner, because that could help the hobby tremendously. Moving on to our next news story, it says here, ham radio operators still transmitting. Well, we do anyway, don't we? But this is talking about, chat news report on amateur radio in the city in Alberta in Canada, that a lot of us are still talking, and we're there talking the talk, because ham radio was a social media long before the things like Facebook and things like that. What do you think, Frank?
Well, I agree, and I think we've had several stories that we've featured here on the podcast, and this is another one of them, and it's sort of making that point. I think we have times of an emergency, whether it's a natural emergency such as COVID or disaster such as we've had. I think it sort of promotes hams becoming more visible, and I think that's what this is. This is as much a visibility story as anything, but at a time where almost uniquely, unlike a flood, unlike a tornado, you've got a contagious virus where people distance themselves, kind of brings this out, and it is a really nice solution for being by yourself. And I think to some degree, particularly the elderly, more vulnerable population, which sort of fits our general demographic. It's just a very nice story.
And also by us hams talking to each other, it does help our mental stability in some ways. It gives us a purpose. So I think it's good news. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
I haven't really got an awful lot to add. It draws this local newspaper draws the comparison to the old chat rooms that were on the internet, and then basically said that, okay, amateur radio has been doing that long before the internet was there, and they're still doing it. So it's a good bit of advertising for the hobby. And the local paper's in the city of Medicine Hat in southeast Alberta, Canada, and the person giving the information to it was Ralph Garrett, BA6RHG from the Medicine Hat Amateur Radio Club. So, it's local news, but it's still news getting out there, and maybe that'll generate a few more amateurs and a few more members for that local radio club.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to see, as we've said, that every other news story seems to be about the virus or gloom and doom. But I think there are more positive stories out there about amateur radio at the moment. I'm not seeing this amateur caused this infringement or this happened or that happened, but there's some very nice positive stories out there, which I think are very good for the hobby. Mine, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think it can only be a good thing. I mean, I don't. It's not big news, is it? But if any of us and if anybody gets approached by the media, and it looks like this guy's done this, you paint the hobby in a good light. I haven't sort of seen the interview or anything they did with him, but the one thing I really hope that he did say was offer ways or at least links of how other people can get licensed. And so you mentioned it's the original social media. Perhaps people are refinding amateur radio as well because of other reasons. And also maybe because the platforms that we know now that are social media, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams, and all the others, is that because some of those might be a bit slow because all of our home internet connections are a lot more maxed out than they normally would be. Either way, it can only be a good thing. Great publicity. And I think even BBC local radio covered ham radio the other day too. I should go back and have another listen to that as well. But yeah, any publicity is good. And I'd say to anybody that is being approached by the media, just paint us in a good light, offer ways or at least a link of where people can go to get licensed. And if you're not the best person to do, refer them to your local radio club and they will be able to provide that interview, I'm sure.
Yeah, the only problem with that is most radio clubs are on lockdown, although they do have email addresses. And
yeah, well, you can get in touch with an email address and there'll be someone there that they can put, if someone contacted Sutton and Cheam, said, hey, we want to do a piece for, XYZ FM, we'd be able to find someone to talk to them and paint the hobby in the way that it should be.
Oh, of course we would. Of course we would. And there are still people out there. I mean, there's a foundation license holder who's been talking to me on and off for the last month or so while we're in lockdown here. And if the lockdown gets eased by the weekend, I'm going to pop round and sort his aerials out because he's struggling. And he's had to wait, unfortunately, but he's still interested. He contacts me every week or so that's good to keep everybody on board. Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
So, yeah, I mean, it's another great example of, during the lockdown, amateur radio getting some good coverage. There was a similar one actually the other day with Mike Bruce, one of the directors of the RHTV M0ITI, was on talk radio, and I had listened to that one actually on a recording, and that was actually pretty good. He talked all about the hobby, and the guy was very interested, and no doubt the listeners were as well. So I think this is great. It's good for the hobby, and it also shows that during the lockdown, like you were talking about, the idea of having a social network is that we are. This is the benefit. Having this hobby is a great benefit. If you're stuck at home, you can actually talk to people and be part of a community and get some benefits. So I think Dan was saying on a previous podcast that his club does a twice a day net, I think on DMR, I'm not sure, where they all sort of get together and chat. So I'm not sure that obviously everyone's doing that in their club, but yeah, it's a great hobby for the current time, shall we say.
I think so. And that's good that things are all happening in the correct way and people are getting involved in, because it is good. Now, I've just seen Bill come back online. So, Bill, I'm going to ask you if you want to comment on this one. If not, we'll bring you in after the next news story. So, would you like to comment on this one, Bill?
No, I'm prepping for the Moonbounce one.
Okay, no problems at all. We'll bring you in on that one. But as I say, it's good. Right. Well, our next news story is FT8 used for ham radio Moonbounce.
Go on, Bill, say it. Go on, Bill, say it. Go on, Bill, say it. Say it, Bill. Say it, Bill.
Say it. Do it.
You know what they want you to say, Bill.
No, actually, I don't. But I always say I love this kind of stuff because it is awesome.
Oh, no. FT8.
Yeah, FT Stupid 8, but it's FT8 with Ultimate DX off the moon.
Yeah. Do you want to go first on this, Bill?
Yeah. Joe Taylor posted on the list a week ago, that Paul, W2HRO, and Peter, PA2V, used the release candidate number 1 for the WSJTX 2.2.0 version to be able to use FT8 on Moonbounce with the delay. So the decoder searches for a time, sync. Your time has to be relatively close, around 2 seconds. But they put a checkbox in there to decode after EME delay, which slides that window to, just about real time to 4 seconds-ish. And that lets them bounce an FT8 signal off the moon. And it is awesome. I love it. I don't know if anyone's ever tried Moonbounce. I've tried Moonbounce and I failed back in the 90s. It's really hard. Lots of power, lots of gain, lots of precision on the antennas, and we were trying it with Morse, but they were able to get the codes off the moon. And the comical part about it, well, comical to me, it wasn't even the best time of the month for the moon for an EME contact. So that would be it's a new record for FT8. I know folks have used JT65 in the past, but wow, way to go, guys. I'm very impressed. Hurrah, hurrah.
Yeah, we thought you would be, Bill. We thought you would be on this one, and it's a good story. Ed, would you like to go next on this one?
Yeah, sure. I think FT8's been used with the Chinese satellite around the moon once, but this time this is proper Earth, Moon, Earth. In other words, no amplification up there. It's just hitting the ground and bouncing back. So this is actually very impressive. It's almost certain it could be done with JT65 because that was designed for EME and other similar system uses. But this is using FT8 and the kludge that has been added in there to extend the handling of the delay time means that you can probably get a communication through FT8 off the moon in EME in probably a quarter or less of the time that it would take with JT65. So yeah, it's an improvement. I just worry a little bit about putting that delay capability in there, because if somebody leaves that turned on or turns it on by mistake, not understanding what they're doing, how is this going to perform with normal communications around the Earth, so to speak? It might start spitting the dummy. Anyway, I'm sure the guys have tested all that because they've actually already released the full version. The RC1 was used for the EME contact, but the full version of 220 was released 2 days ago. So the fully tested, fully supported version is out there now. But yeah, good on them. It would be nice for somebody to do it with a voice mode or something, perhaps 3dB, but I think we're a little bit away from that still.
Yeah, I'll say good technology. Martin, we haven't played with FT8 yet, have we? Well, not seriously. I did once on the Belfast.
I find, sorry, but I do not get excited about FT8. It's an interesting mode. It's very clever as what it can do. but I just don't get excited about it. If you want your computers to just work the rest of the other side of the world, plug it into the internet and be done with it. You don't need to do it over there. And just let it automatically run. I'm sorry, I know some people are into it. I'm not into FT8. I was quite interested in FT8 Cool, but then it was a case of my interface failed on me. I never got around to doing anything else with it. I have to ask though, when it comes to Moonbounce, I thought FT8 was what people were using anyway, because we had a talk at the club, and it was a while ago now, I'm sure, and they were showing videos of people demonstrating this. And in particular, they mentioned FT8. And if it wasn't FT8, they certainly referenced it. Maybe there's a point that like this can happen in the future. But I don't know. But I'd be interested to see what that was. My next question is if they've done it with FT8, what about, isn't there an FT4 that's quicker? And perhaps, you know, someone could try it with FT8 Cool and then have almost a live conversation with someone?
Yeah, somebody asked that question about FT4. I read it on one of the lists, and they said for some reason no, with FT4, because of its timing, it won't work. It needs to be the slower FT8. And by the way, perhaps somebody at your lecture mentioned the program that was in use, which is WSJTX, which supports JT65, FT8, FT4, and a whole bundle of other ones. Maybe that's
they might have said this is the same software you use for JT,
yes.
for FT8. Okay, so maybe I just misheard that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it started off, that WSJTX started off with the JT6, JT9, JT65, and FT8 was then added to it, and then eventually FT4. So
it was certainly a weak signal mode that they were talking about. I knew it wasn't as easy to do with plain voice unless you've got a 25-meter dish or something like that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, in some countries, the only way you can get a high power license, for instance, Australia, if you want a 1 kilowatt license, the only time that the regulator there will issue it to you is if you're doing Moonbounce. It's considered that it's a requirement to have high power, but these guys weren't using high power, were they?
I'm using Moonbounce via my mate on the local repeater. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the other question is but it doesn't actually say here what power they're running, but they're only using, was it 4 Yagi setups on 432, but it doesn't. The article doesn't say what power they're running.
That. I seem to think that the people that were doing Moonbounce before said that you only need the big station at one end. Yeah. So you can have a massive station on one end, and there was someone that managed to do it like a 2-element Yagi or something years ago.
I think it was an 8-element or something, but yeah, I think it was 2 meters.
Did it with a 2-element. Yeah, he definitely did a 2-element. Yeah.
Crikey!
But the station on the other side, he had 24, stacked Yagis or whatever it was. It was a massive system. The other side he was talking to, but he did it, and we covered it as a news story. You can do it. Try it.
That's right. The other guy's doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Dorothy from Essex Hams, and I'm trying to remember your call sign, Dorothy, as I apologise because I should have looked it up, but Dorothy was, when she was not a full licence holder, did Moonbounce early on, low power, and that was...
She did it with 10 watts.
Yeah, and that was quite an excitement back then. So, Dorothy's a lovely lady. Whenever I see her, she's always pleased to see me as well.
M0LMR, Martin.
M0LMR, yeah, nice one. There's a lot going on with this low signal level and bits and pieces and Moonbounce. Frank, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, this is Joe Taylor, former Nobel laureate in his retirement years, continuing to impact amateur radio, continuing to nuance the particular algorithms and software, so it does some applications. And I understand what Martin Rothwell was saying, and I think there's quite that kind of response to FT8. And I think Chris Howard had on a previous show some comments about kind of boring or what have you, and that's there. But what he's trying to do is develop a use case that perhaps is exciting. But I was very disappointed in this. And the lady from Essex Hams, I don't know if she has a sister named Mary, but there should have been a female ham named Mary involved in this test. Because then it would have been Peter, Paul, and Mary.
All right, Frank. Good one. Okay. Chris, what's your thoughts on this?
I think it's been said, to be fair. I think FT8's very clever, very, very clever. I mean, the only thing, I've said, like I said before, I did try FT8. I found it a little bit boring because it was all, to me, a little bit too automated. I did use previously quite a lot of Whisper, which is a similar sort of technology, again, from Frank. So, yeah, Whisper also from Joe Taylor was using similar technology, and it's very, very clever. And, I know that in the past we talked about Morse code being able to heard, from much further away than some of the phone modes. Well, FT8 takes it to that level. With things like Whisper and FT8 and J65 take it to that next level. So yeah, very, very clever technology. I'm sure it involves lots of very, very clever maths that's way beyond my knowledge. But no, it's not something I've ever done. It's not something that particularly interests me. But certainly clever stuff.
So just throwing the hand grenade in the room here. We have ham radio, we have SSB, we have FM, we have all these sorts of things. Should we now set a separate category called Joe Taylor? Well, no, the guy's done a lot of work. I'm being semi-serious here. He's written a lot of low power modes. So, just a thought. Anyway, I'm going to behave myself and go almost quiet as I move on to the next news story. And equally, if I was going to throw the hand grenade in the room again, I'd change the news headline title to "An Old Bird Returns from the Dead." AO27 returns from the dead. And I think this is great. We've found another satellite up there that suddenly woke itself up. Martin, what's your thoughts?
First of all, yay! Another satellite that we can work. Fantastic. It doesn't surprise me that these things do go off the air from time to time. We all know that the technology fails. Typically, batteries and things fail. In particular, the earlier satellites and the birds that are up there, probably with NiCad batteries or whatever in there. They're going to fail from time to time. And of course, eventually they wake up, get enough sunlight, and either get enough power in the batteries to power themselves back up again, or just to run for a short period of time. But I do want to know, how do people suddenly find these things? Are there people that just sit and monitor these things all day? Are there people looking at Spectrum like, hang on a second, what's that? What's coming up? Let's have a tune into that. I'd be interested to see the kind of technology. I don't know when AO27 was launched. It doesn't say that on here.
1993.
93, so it's quite old technology on there. But yeah, it's always a good thing. Any other satellite that is up there is a good thing. I'm still trying to learn how to use satellites. I've got my Arrow antenna. I've had a few goes, all unsuccessful, because unfortunately the new handheld I have has different despite being the same model, has a different programming software that doesn't allow you to do the proper wide split like you could before for the FM satellites. So that's something else to try. But AO27, fantastic, and it seemed to mention that people were able to send D-Star through it. So that in itself is an achievement, considering that D-Star hadn't even been invented at the point when this satellite was launched.
Yeah, that's good. Bill, you're more of a satellite person than most of us today. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not. I have more satellite QSOs. That's about it. No, this one's really interesting. AO27 was one that went up when I was a wee young lad in college. VHF up, UHF down. Died, expected death, early 2000s, I vaguely remember. This one was kind of interesting. It came back to life. It's not really an FM bird. It was meant for data. So for instance, they were testing D-Star radios. That's where it comes into, because, it's a data signal. Up, data up, data down, radios decode it, works, and all that other stuff. I actually think that was during the 90s. That part I'm not solid on, but I vaguely remember this as being one of the first birds that had D-Star activity on it, and I thought it was designed that way. The interesting part, I feel, is Mike, I'm going to mispronounce your name, Mike Wyrick, N3UC. He was on the original team designing this thing. So when he did some remote I don't know if it's firmware updates or remote coding, he was able to increase the FM repeater run from, a couple minutes until a thing rebooted, to, 8 minutes per orbit. So 4 minutes on the ascending pass and 4 minutes on the descending pass. That probably is limitation of the hardware or whatever state the thing is left in from coming out of Zombieland. Yeah, so we'll see. It's pretty interesting. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, so I haven't caught one of the passes where it was actually on, so I haven't been able to listen to it. It's on the to-do list. The one that actually will probably beat me to it will be Ruth. I'm sure Ruth will just jump on it just to get a QSO on it while it's still active before it finally dies again. And to answer your question, Martin, there is another sub-hobby of our hobby, which is signal listening to, I don't want to say space junk, but space junk. And a lot of times they, will listen to downlink frequencies and they will put, multiple pieces together. For instance, they know that AO27 had a downlink frequency of 436,800. So if you get a telemetry beacon on there, you kind of know, okay, that might be AO27. Likewise, they decoded the telemetry and they compared it to the last known orbital parameters, assuming the normal degradation happens as gravity slowly works its way as pulling everything back in the orbit to burn up, unless it's too light. That's the interesting thing about CubeSats. I thought originally all CubeSats burned up, but the answer is no. Most of them do, but it really depends on their initial injection orbit, because if they do it right, the thing just stays there. It's light enough because it's 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters, or no, 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeter cube, and it's light enough that gravity doesn't pull it back in. So a lot of them are still floating around like missiles, waiting to impact into something else in space. But some of them, depending on how they were injected in orbit, will burn up again, which is probably why there was a big to-do last year or the year before about the FCC requiring all the space agencies that wish to launch to have end-of-life plans for all satellites. I don't know if anyone remembers that story. That was over a year ago at this point, I would think. But you had to have end-of-life plans for your satellites before the FCC would grant you the STA, on their part of, the launch of satellites, multiple agencies you have to go through here in the States, which is probably why some of the satellites show up in India and get launched from there, because there's less regulations. But that's another story I don't want to get into at this point.
Yeah, we've got to stay out of that one, Bill. Better stay out of that one. But, good news. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'll go through a question to Bill. You're saying that the transponder's firmware has been updated by a ground station to extend how long it can be used for. Because the article says, the article that we've got in our show notes says, when commanded on by control operators, the transponder is active for about 2 minutes before reverting to telemetry transmissions only. And you were saying it's extended it to 8 minutes or something?
Yeah, the MSAT News Bulletin 145, it was last week. I remember reading in there that Patrick WD9EWK had an article in there that thanks to Mike working on it. Or actually, sorry, 152. Oh, man, my brain's fried. May 31st, that 152 that Mike N3UC was able to get it running longer. So... places in FM mode, 8 minutes per orbit.
Yeah, that I find impressive, that some old equipment that has died and come back to life, the guy can still get access to it and change the code on it. That to me is as impressive as the fact that it came back to life, because I presume it's the usual reason that it came back to life, that the batteries eventually destroyed themselves and it went onto solar power only. Do we know that?
I don't know that, but that's normally what happens. Or it gets irradiated so much that it shorts out whatever it unshorts what's shorted out, or white clears out the RAM enough the thing to reboot and stuff like that. These things are getting bombarded by cosmic rays like crazy.
Yeah, that's true. So I actually find the fact that the guy could get in there and reprogram it as quite an impressive thing on something that basically was space junk, you know. So anyway, be interesting to hear from any of our listeners if they actually managed to get into AO27. So if anybody is able to take a go at that and actually get a signal through and work somebody, let us know.
I'm sure they will, Ed. I'm sure they will. And it's great. It's great that amateurs are still able to do some of these things, because we've probably got the time and the excitement to do it. It's probably not commercially viable to do what some amateurs have actually done. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think it's been a great discussion. I'll just add a couple of things. If you, Bill made a very cogent comment, I think. If you recall my interview with Thomas Witherspoon, K4SWL, we touched on what we might generally call, kind of weird listening patterns. And some are not ham, some are not licensed. They just listen. And satellite listening and other telemetry types of listening is sort of one little thing. Non-directional beacons on the very, very low frequencies is another. There are people that do NBD hunters. It's kind of like bird hunting. You want the brown thrasher from Georgia, and you look at it in Maine and that kind of thing. That is a very ardent group of people, very narrow but very deep in what they do. As we've been talking, looking at the AMSAT tracking, AO27 has passed north to south over Australia. While we've been talking about this one story, I've been tracking it. And if you Google that satellite, you'll come up with the webpage of PE0SAT, and it has a neat page about this one. They've recovered what I think is I got the biggest jolly out of the fact that they went back to the Wayback Machine in the Internet Archive to get some of the technical docs to figure out how some of the test data were passed through that. And if you look at PE0SAT's website, you can see that he has a lot of the specific channel for what's in the AART board in the receiver, which really kind of helps you figure out what you're likely hearing. So don't ever, give up on hams to do stuff like this, and that's part of what makes our hobby as exciting as it is. And it's up to folks like us to tell people about what's going on. So it's just a really, really neat ham radio story.
Yeah, agree with you 100%, Frank. Agree with you 100%. Chris, last words on this one?
Well, I think it's been said. I mean, to me, this is just very, very clever. People that are, why would you do this? Well, because they can. This reminds me a little bit of, I think, of kind of the old days of people hacking computer systems, not necessarily to do things criminally, just because they're curious, because they want to know how things work, and because they want to know, the insides of things. And this just reminds me of that, really. They just, I know in the early days people used to hack into phone systems just because they were curious as to how the thing works and, wanting to understand it. And this is kind of a similar thing in my mind. It's they're trying to, not doing anything illegal by my mind, but they are just trying to really take the nuts and bolts apart and figure things out. So no, this is very clever and very interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is, Chris. Certainly is. So all in all, a very good story. Last news story: amateur radio fellow astronauts heading to the space station after a historic launch. This was the SpaceX launch that happened at the weekend. Chris, you sent me details this was happening, and I'm sure you watched it. What do you think?
I did watch it, and it's amazing. Sadly, we didn't get to see it go over. There were reports we might have been able to see its pass over the UK later that night, but sadly, I had a look and I couldn't see anything. I saw the ISS go over, and it was supposed to come over shortly afterwards, but sadly, it was too faint in the sky to pick it out. But yeah, very, very interesting. First time there's been certainly US. I think it's the first US launch to the International Space Station with people on board for about 10 years now. I think that's right, or 9 or 10 years now, something like that. And and they're now using a commercial rather than it being a NASA or a government thing. It's a commercial company, SpaceX, that have done this. But yeah, in terms of the amateur radio side, yeah, absolutely fantastic. They've got more people on board that have got a license, and it'd be great to hear them actually on the radio, so we could actually talk to them sometime, because I would love one day to actually make contact with the ISS.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We've listened to it going over, haven't we, a number of times, but certainly that sounds good. Frank, what's your thoughts?
I agree with you. I think it's a good story. It marks the continued transition by NASA from a government agency doing it all or through direct subcontractors like Johnson Controls, which they had done, to a commercializing force where they contract with external companies to do stuff. And SpaceX is one of those companies that they have been doing that through. I had a little bit of a role in commercialization of remote sensing data back in the late 90s, so I was directly involved with that. So I see it as part of that stream and that evolution to where we'll have not only airlines, but perhaps space lines. You want to go to Mars at some point, maybe your grandchildren, then you book a flight on SpaceX or what have you. So it's just another one of those steps, and it's a successful one, at least thus far.
Certainly is. Well, the future, who knows what the future is going to be in the next 10, 15 years. We've had phenomenal changes in the last 10, 20 years, so a lot keeps happening there. Ed, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think probably the fact that we've got Virgin Galactic as a company now echoes what Frank was saying about the commercialization of space. In this particular case, I also watched the coverage, and the coverage from NASA TV and SpaceX combined was actually extremely interesting because they had all of the audio feeds running through it, so you could hear all the technical stuff going on in the background. And they had a problem with just the microphone connection. It wasn't in the right mixer and so on. So the sort of stuff that we as amateurs understand what's going on. And who was sorting the problem out for them? Chris Cassidy, who is the current commander on the ISS, and he's also KF5 KDR. He's a ham. Coming up on the Crew Dragon Endeavour was Bob Bainken, K5GGX, and Doug Hurley. Doug Hurley isn't licensed as yet. But yeah, amateurs get in there. Just watching the actual coverage was interesting. That it sort of gave you the behind the scenes look at what was going on, and I found that actually very, very honest of NASA and SpaceX to do that, and very enjoyable to watch. Of course, what we've now got is that Bob and Doug, their project, their action was to prove that they could get up there on a privately built spacecraft and dock and get on board the ISS, and then later on come back down again. That means they actually don't have any allocated work on board the ISS, from what I was hearing. That will mean that certainly Bob should have some more time to get on the radio, not just for school contacts, but in general. So it'll be interesting. I think the next, they're probably going to be up there 4 or 6 weeks. I mean, I haven't got an actual date, but they was talking of that kind of length of time. So let's say in the next 4 weeks probably is the best chance ever to get a contact with an astronaut on the ISS, because, you know, Bob's going to have some spare time, because he'll be helping out like Doug will be as well, but they haven't got specific scientific projects that they're doing on the ISS. They're the test pilots that brought the new ship up and will take it and take it back down to the Earth as well, rather than going up there for a specific project. So we'll see if we start hearing Bob Bainken, K5GGX, under the NA0 ISS call. It'd be really nice if we did.
Yeah, I understand it'd be great, and you know, in fairness, a lot of fun. Bill, what's your thoughts on this? Did you see it all happen?
I watched it later because we were in the middle of stuff that day. They launched during my in-law's 50th wedding anniversary, which that's a different story on how we pulled that off without actually we had a party without having a party. It basically became a cruise where people drove by in their cars. It was kind of neat. But I did watch it later, and it was really neat. One of the things that came up was the last shuttle launch. That was 2011, right around this time, because it was Atlantis. And it was STS-135, if I remember, because that was really cool. Because they were delivering parts of the International Space Station to the International Space Station. Yes, the call is NA1SS for ISS, and if anybody wants to listen for voice, it's 145.8. At least that's the last one I knew. I don't think they really don't change them very often, so I'm pretty sure that's still it.
Yeah, it's on the RS website, and they normally work split. So for Europe, it's 145.2 in, so transmit and listen on 145.8. For the US and the Americas, it's a different frequency, but it's all on the RS website.
Yes, the Amateur Radio International Space Station site. That's correct. Thank you, Ed. But yeah, the U.S. is launching again. Well, a company in the U.S. is launching, and there's a couple other ones coming down the pike. Likewise, as far as I know, NASA's still working on their own project, so that should come up in a few years. And this was a successful demo. They launched, they got up there, and now they're going to come back down. So it's I'm trying to remember what I do remember the same thing, Ed, that they were saying in there that there's another flight coming up relatively soon to test some more of this stuff. So the amount of engineering that goes into this thing is actually mind-boggling. The sheer size of the rocket they use, the sheer design of the capsule that they use to put the crew into, and then an interface with the International Space Station, and all the technology in that, it's quite an engineering challenge just to get us in the low Earth orbit. So I know that there's some long-term plans about, getting back to Moon, maybe Mars, maybe a comet. For some of this, I know amateur radio will go along with it. So there's some interesting stuff that could be happening in the next, decade or so. A couple months ago, I probably gave some predictions, but right now I can't even predict the month of June. So I'm going to sit out on predictions for a little bit, guys. I hope you don't mind.
Now, as I said, Bill, everything is happening so fast, mate. It really is at the moment. Martin, last words on this one. Big boys' toys, do you reckon?
Pretty much. I mean, Ed made a comment there that I quite liked, and about NASA being very, very honest. And I will say it for NASA. NASA do seem to like to shout about what they do, and fair play to them. So they should do. Space does fascinate me. I'm not sure I totally buy everything we're told about what happens in space, but it's certainly interesting to see and hear about. But radio-wise, when I didn't watch this, I was sort of aware it was happening, but didn't really know too much about it, only because I've sort of seen it on Facebook. But I do see a lot of people asking all sorts of questions on social media about the amateur radio stuff, people wanting to listen to NASA communicating with the ship on 145.8. Some people saying, I've heard stuff from the space station on 145.8, but I can't hear both sides of the conversation. Now, I get lots of questions like this, coming from the kind of people that are on the CB, the 446, the shortwave listener groups. There's a lot of amateurs asking these questions as well. In particular, not knowing why you can't hear both sides of the uplink and, what both sides of the conversation. So it does surprise me. But, obviously, you go in there and trying to help out and answer as many questions as you can, but try and refer people, go to this website. It will tell you a lot about it. But it's fascinating seeing, the fact that they've got some more amateurs up there that might have some more time to operate. Fantastic. There's some great videos online of when Doug Wheelock was up there. He was filming. In fact, somebody actually happened by pure coincidence to be taping the ground station as well. So you can actually see both sides of the contact. And it's not the kind of pre-organized questions that people like the schools have to ask. There's people going on and saying, hey, what are you most looking forward to when you get back to Earth? And, the guys on the space just say, "Oh, just picking out M&Ms," and the things you wouldn't expect. But it doesn't surprise me they've got amateur radio up there. The guys, it's a way of not having to have formal conversations with the ground crew via your designated satellite links. It's a case of just talk to ordinary people who are just curious about what you're doing. So, yeah, well done.
Yeah, well, I think we've had some really good news stories tonight. Thoroughly enjoyed each and every one of them. Now I'm going to ask the boys what they've been up to since the last time they were on the podcast. We'll start with Chris, M0TCH, M1MRB.
M1MRB, hello. Yes, well, I'm going to let Frank talk about his talk he did for us. We had an excellent speaker, shall we say, at our recent online club meeting. We've been playing with Zoom. I think a lot of amateur radio clubs are as well, or certainly with lots of different options there. We've chosen to use Zoom for our online meetings. So clearly we're not allowed to meet in person at the minute. So Frank very kindly offered to do a talk for us, and it was very. But I'll let Frank talk about that, and maybe you, Martin, later. So we had that, which is good, and we've got another one coming up later in June with another speaker, again over the internet. So yeah, that was very good. What else? Well, I've also been playing a little bit. This is not amateur radio, but I have set up an aircraft tracker. So the ADSB facility that aircraft have, where they transmit their location and other information, is something that you'll see online with websites that you can use to track aircraft, and they're based on a number of people that have these little receivers that upload the data to their websites. And I've got one, and actually it was pretty simple. It's just a Raspberry Pi, an SDR dongle, a cheap one, and an aerial. And so I actually bought an aerial specifically for that, the 1090 megahertz frequency it operates on. And it's surprising how far away aircraft, given it's a pretty high frequency, how far away it's picking. He's picking up aircraft 100 miles away, if not slightly more. Now I know they're pretty high in the sky, but I was surprised to be able to pick up aircraft from that sort of distance. So it's working pretty well, and it's just literally Raspberry Pi Zero, which is the very basic, small, tiny little computer which you connect up via a USB connection and into the aerial, and you download an image from the internet which has got on it the software required, and you pretty much boot it up and put in your details, and off it goes. And it's actually really, really straightforward, really simple, and that's actually quite interesting to sort of see. And yeah, it's just sat there now. I've got a little area on top of the garage roof now, which is running all the time. So yeah, interesting technology, and so that's what I've mainly been doing radio-wise. Martin, done a few contacts on HF. I'm sure we're all going to say that the bands have been really good actually recently, especially 10 meters and 6 meters. I worked a few stations on 10 meters recently, so yeah, that's been it from me, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, and as I say, sorry for the slip. So often I'm working on the radio. I introduced you like I was working on the radio, but never mind, Chris. At least it was correct. Okay, Martin. You've missed a couple. What have you been up to since the last time we had you on?
Since the last time you had me on, I became a dad. So I'm somewhat limited in the time that I can actually spend playing with my toys at the moment, as obviously the time that I am not working, and I am working from home at the moment, is time that I am spending with my daughter. And, being able to come out here and record this today, I sort of had to leave my wife looking after the baby, but it's all good. So a little bit tired. Also at the moment, because they've been threatening lightning, my antennas are all unplugged. So it's just easier than getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning if you see a flash in the room. Played a little bit with D-Star and Fusion. Also installed a new Wi-Fi network into my house, which 3 access points, and they roam properly as you walk around the house. So because we're decorating what will be the baby's room, I've had to move the phone line, and thought that was the ideal opportunity to install some decent Wi-Fi kit. So I've done that, one on the ground floor, 1 access point in the loft, and 1 out in the garden as well. And it taught me one thing: the ISP supplied router that they give me is absolute rubbish, and the pro grade kit works a hell of a lot better. But that's what I've been doing. So I've got 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz network that cover the whole house. I tell you what, if you're ever thinking of doing that, wireless networks, considering they're called wireless networks, they use a hell of a lot of wires. I reckon I've used about 100 meters of Cat5e cable.
Well, there you go. When it's supposed to be wireless. But you didn't, Martin. You didn't mention you got me on 11 meters.
Did I? We covered that like before on the last episode.
Did we? Oh,
Yeah.
I tell you what, I'm losing it.
I could have told you that.
I've lost it, mate. Oh, great.
We're
Never
going to get Colin
mind.
to update your website, just with your profile. It's like Martin Butler. He's lost it.
Totally. Incomplete. Shouldn't
He's
be
had
allowed
17 cups of coffee and everything sounds like trumpets underwater to him.
Yep. I've missed a coffee this afternoon. That's what the problem is. Ed, what have you been up to since the last time we spoke?
I've been doing a few things, and like a couple of the others, some of them are not necessarily directly radio related, but the first one on my list is not amateur radio related, but it needed my amateur radio skills. I've been adjusting my MIMO antenna, my MIMO antenna for my LTE reception to my hybrid internet router, again onto routers and networks, etc., around the home. And it's amazing how understanding amateur radio and being able to search for the right things online to tell you, for instance, where the next cell site is and which area it's supposed to be covering and which area it doesn't cover, helps set everything up to get the maximum throughput. So that was one non-amateur radio. Back onto amateur radio, I've eventually got my portable amplifier, the 70-watt one, working correctly and reliably now, which has helped me on my first 2 SOTA activations after the lockdown, both of which were quite successful. What else am I doing? I'm testing a new version of some remote rig control system for its developer, somebody I've worked with before, and that's all I can say about that at the moment, but the new version is looking very good. Something else I can't tell you a lot about is a secret project with Frank, so I'll shut up on that one. And something, again, still ham radio related, but a little bit outside of what I'd normally do. I've been coordinating some more ham radio material for a shortwave broadcast station in Germany that's run by radio amateurs on the, I think it's the 31 and the 75 meter bands. So been spreading out quite a few different things since last time I was on. And I say several of them not directly amateur radio related, but helped by the skills I have through being a radio ham. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, well, our skills as radio hams often come in very, very useful in general life situation. Frank, what have you been up to since we spoke last?
Well, Martin, to pick up on that theme about your coffee affinity, I feel like I'm a few beans short of a full pot. But we've had some home repairs, normal kind of maintenance, so I've been monitoring some of that. Had the motherboard go out on my main workstation. I've not bought a brand new computer in over a decade. I tend to buy used and rebuild. So while we're recording today, I should have the last hard drive come in, and I'll spend probably this evening rebuilding a workstation for my desktop. But I have gotten up close and personal with my laptop. So the normal kind of things there. But in amateur radio, Ed will bring that off double secret probation if you ever watched the movie Animal House. I've been working on a new contest, and I'm more of a portable operator than a contest participant. But the things that I've heard other portable ops say is, well, I don't really get into those contests because those big guns, they're always going to win. And so it got me into thinking about, well, could we use the concept of a golf handicap to try to level the playing field? And it's been a real delight to have Ed, 2 members of the podcast, Ed, as well as Bill Barnes on the steering committee, along with a dozen other people. And it will be called the Portable Operations Challenge. And it will try to pit the normal QTH big gun challengers, if you will, or even little pistols, against portable operators in a way that we're trying to standardize the scoring mechanism, or handicap it, I guess is the better way of putting it, so that they're on a more equal playing field. We'll have more announcements in the future, but Ed and Bill are very instrumental in that. So that's part of Ed's little bit of a cryptic comment. I'll go ahead and let that cat out of the bag, Ed. The other thing is working with our club to parallel what the ARRL is doing with their On the Air magazine, podcast, and blog. We've started an in quote Elmer or New Ham net, and we decided to just generalize that because everyone's got questions. And so we had our first one this past week, and then I'll be net control teacher for the next one, and we'll parallel what's in the On the Air magazine, and we'll see how that goes. That's a little bit of a different thing. And certainly, last but not least, I had the honor and privilege of being the guest Zoom speaker with the Sutton and Cheam Club, and Martin, I believe, is the committee chair, and Chris is the secretary. And it was a warm-up act for a really good speaker that they're going to have next time. But everybody was a really good sport. I didn't see anybody doze off, and I had a very, very good time there sharing some thoughts about the futures, more than one, of amateur radio. And I will say, Martin and Chris, there was, during the video, there was a gentleman who spoke about the Sutton and Cheam Club and talked about particularly you, Martin, but also you, Chris, and how you brought him in. You guys need to clip that out and put it on your website as advertisement. It was just a wonderful testimony of the way a club should act toward new hams. So that's about it, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, well, we were lucky to get you, Frank, because you did a good talk, and you sometimes sort of put yourself down just a little bit, but it was a really good talk, and everybody I spoke to afterwards thoroughly enjoyed themselves. I know the discussion continued after you'd left the room. They were still talking about it for at least another half an hour. So, all in all, that was very, very good. Bill, what have you been up to?
Quite a bit, actually. Couple comments here quick. So, first off, M1MRB. This is Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo for ID. Had to get that in there. Martin, you picked good stuff, man. I picked Ubiquity, but the other runner-up was exactly what you got, and you're absolutely correct. For the vast majority of people that have more than one machine on a ISP connection, the router provided by the company sucks.
Yeah.
So I'm there with you.
Built to a cost. Built to a cost,
it's
not quality.
Yes, and I had a similar problem to what Colin has with the teenagers and internet usage, and just switching over from quote unquote the factory stuff to prosumer gear made a world of difference. I'm currently I have a ridiculously large house and I have 2 access points, and I'm going to put a third in, and the system just literally is just so easy to work with. It doesn't really bother you. You have to think about it. So as far as radio stuff, it's been a month. It's been quite a month. Things are loosening up over here a little bit as things are passing, so we can start thinking about getting outside. Just like Ed was saying, he got to do 2 SOTA activations. I did not get to do a SOTA activation yet, but I had the stuff with me. There's a SOTA summit about 15 minutes from the in-laws' house, and I brought the stuff along, and if the kids were behaving well enough that I could step out for an hour, I would have activated it. That didn't work out, but I ended up activating on the picnic table behind their house at the church next door. And so that's always fun, because it's something you should just practice. If you want to do portable ops before you start hiking up a mountain or going to a park or something, just find a bench somewhere or a picnic table somewhere and just set up, play with the antennas, figure out directions. Some antennas have directionality, some don't. This particular time I set it up pointing towards the east, off the end, and it was interesting how that changed the stations I could hear. It's always good to practice this kind of stuff. And it ended up being, I made no QSOs, I'll tell you that. But I had a good time just tuning around the bands, checking out 17, which, by the way, 17's been open a couple times. So check that out. Likewise, as it also was said, 10 and 6 has been open. It is summertime. And I've gotten multiple text messages while I was in the middle of working at meetings at work being like, get on 6. Maybe after work, guys. I did make a couple FT8 contacts at the beginning of the month. The big thing I did for May was the Hamvention QSO party. I think I did 10 or 20 stations in there. But the one of note is I finally worked KB6NU on 40 meters CW. And the thing you have to understand about Dan is fun. So he's contesting, he's going bang, CQ test, bang. And so I turned the speed down to something I can actually send or actually receive, sent my call out, and he asked for a repeat, and I sent it out, and then he turned his speed down. So we were good. So we did the QSO exchange and stuff, and then he started having a chat with me. The problem is my brain locked up about halfway through a sentence. So I do have to do more practice with Morse because once I lose the rhythm, it's like, okay, that's a G, that's an R, that's an E, an A, and then what? And by that point I'm already, 5 characters gone, and you kind of lose the rhythm. But I finally got him on 40 meter CW during the Hamvention QSO party. Aside from that, things have been really busy. I originally assumed incorrectly that working from home would be like, the pace will drop back. Not really. The pace picks up more because the normal, 30 seconds talk to somebody as you're walking in and out of a building, all that stuff goes away. So then, therefore, everything ends up being scheduled meetings, and therefore a lot of your time gets taken up. So that's a new interesting thing that I did not know before about working from home. So that's all in all. That's all I've been up to for the month with ham radio and other stuff. Back to you, Martin.
Bill, I never realised that because I'm still working, but I didn't realise that obviously didn't think about it, that you'd have a quick chat with somebody instead of having to have a meeting with them. Yeah, good call on that one. Not that my job's that technical anymore. I have this nice little job, which I won't go too much into, just in case they decide not to employ me anymore. But it's good fun. Right, what have I been up to? Well, a little bit. I started off. I have a Hacker Mayflower 2. A VHF FM broadcast radio circa 1962. I've talked about it a few times. It's pretty much done. The only thing I can't do now is I'd like to realign it really and just touch it up a bit, because I'm sure at nearly 60 years old it could do with a bit of adjustment. But even so, it sounds really, really good. I've done the cabinet, I've done all the electronics, and it works quite well. The only problem is Mrs. B doesn't like it, so it'll probably end up gone at some point in time. Interestingly, did another job, wasn't radio related, but us hams do like to take things apart and fiddle. Mrs. B came down and said her electric toothbrush wasn't working, and then shocked the hell out of me by telling me they cost 200 quid for a new one. And I went, hang on a minute, what's wrong with it? She said, it's not holding a charge. So I looked up the battery it required, including the cost of postage to me. The battery was £9. And I'd say...
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I'd say it's not for the faint-hearted, but if you've got a Braun toothbrush, one of these Braun toothbrushes, which seem to be the ones that lots of people have, but on their website, they actually give you detailed instructions on how to do it. Now, I will say, you have to read their instructions, and it's not for the faint-hearted, but it is achievable, put it that way, and I did it. It didn't take long to do. Weather station, I've been playing with the weather station I made some time ago on a breadboard, an Arduino weather station, and I'm just about to put it into a case now. I'm making the case ready for it, so that was good. My daughter turned up the other weekend and ended up taking my car all over the weekend and left her car for Dad to fix the problems. As Martin, you're going to find out a lot about this in about 18 years' time. Yeah. Have had some FM and HF contacts, and as Chris said, HF has been really open, 10 metres and 6 and all those sort of things. Have actually had some contacts. But I did actually work Jim Lee from the BBC, operating their station at Broadcasting House, G8 BBC. Chris rang me up and he said, Jim's on, he's got a mini pile-up going. And I gave Jim a call. In fairness, it was probably ground wave on 40 metres, and the quality wasn't best because I'm going ground wave across London. But we had a contact and it was good. And the last thing I've been playing with, on Monday I got given an ARRL handbook. What's exciting about that, you guys are going to say? Well, this one's a 1966 ARRL handbook. And everything in it is pretty much valve. There's very little solid state stuff. And there's quite a large section on valves and the characteristics in it. And the construction, there's photographs of some of the construction done in it, in valves. And it's a work of art, some of the photographs and the construction people have done. So I'm gradually sort of just flicking through it and reading the odd bits I'm interested in. But, a 1966 handbook that somebody was going to throw out, because this isn't any good, is it? Yes, it is. Anyway, enough of my lecture. So that's what I've been up to, boys. So I think we've all been pretty busy. Right. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Thanks, Martin. It's been fun as usual.
Yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Mr. Mike Rothwell, good to have you back after about 8 weeks.
It's lovely to be back. It's lovely to be back. Thank you.
Yeah. We have
and can I just say congratulations to Martin, by the way, on
congratulations
on becoming a father.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I'm off now to not get any sleep for the rest of the night.
You won't get any sleep for the rest of your life.
Yeah, rest of the year.
I love my daughter, but she likes to be awake at night.
Yeah.
I can't resist her little smiles.
Well, their job is to eat, poop, and smile. That's it.
Yeah, till about 18 months, Frank. Then you can wind them up.
Yes.
Right. I'd like to thank Mr. Ed Durrant DD5LP.
Yeah, thanks for the invite as always. Great fun, Martin.
Yeah, great to have you, Ed. Mr. Frank Howell, thanks for joining us. K4FMH.
Thank you, and I always enjoy this group.
Yeah, great fun, and we'll catch up with you soon, Frank. And Mr. Bill Bowens, WC3B, who joined us after his meeting. Great to have you on board, Bill.
Yes, thank you very much for having me and tolerating me while I was tardy. And good job on getting the call sign right. I knew it would work.
Listen, I know I put it wrong in the document. It's because I cut and paste from a previous document. So if you changed it and highlighted it, okay, guilty, Bill. Sorry.
You're giving away our secrets, Martin, with documents and things.
Yeah, we're not supposed to talk about it, and that you misspelled my name wrong the first time ever. I just went in and fixed it and didn't say a word.
My apologies, Bill.
How difficult is it to spell Bill?
He hasn't had, he's had too much coffee.
Gotcha. Okay.
Guys, I never mean offence by it. Honest, I don't. And I know Frank has the same problem because he wrote to Colin once and said, "Dear Colin." And I know he didn't mean it. So anyway,
I don't know.
Yeah. Right. I'm going to say 73s to you all, and we'll move on with the podcast. 73, guys.
See ya.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with very topical news at the moment after the Spacex launch the other day, that Ares has re-established itself in the States to become known as Ares USA, and this is going to be an independent organisation. Now, those of you who don't know, Ares serves as an intermediary to arrange contacts between schools and organisations on Earth with the International Space Station crew members. Since late May, Ares USA has been incorporated as a non-profit entity in Maryland, USA. So basically, though, the Frank Bauer, KA3HDO, who's the lead of the group, basically knows the fact that really nothing much changes in terms of their day-to-day operation. He says the working group status made it cumbersome to establish partnerships, sign agreements, and solicit grants. These can be done as an established organisation. And as I say, while they're deeply indebted to their partners, including the AWL, AMSAT, and the old Ares setup, it will allow them to continue its collaborative work with not only the Ares international groups, but also their partners and sponsors, with their goal remaining to connect education groups with the opportunity to interact with the astronauts aboard the space station. So say you might now see a change in things when you look at this stuff to do with contacts in the space station, now that Ares USA will be responsible for making those contacts going forward. We stick with the States and also news about space stations. Some groups have got involved. Ares, Magnitude.io, ISS Above, and ISS National Lab Station Space Explorers. They've got together to create a STEM project for students who obviously are seeing disruption with their education at the moment with the COVID-19 pandemic. And what they've basically done is they've created an APRS payload race across North America educational challenge for groups to get involved in. Now, obviously, once the balloons are airborne, students can track each balloon location, altitude, and temperature, which are fed automatically using, of course, APRS to get people working from there. So basically, say they find that students are tallying and tracking states each balloon travels through and plots altitude versus temperature and other parameters. They're also researching weather patterns, and they're making assumptions from their own data. And this can include things like with speed variations due to weather, etc., and trying to predict the balloon's flight. So certainly a very interesting use of amateur radio and helping education during these times. The GQRP Club are looking to see if there are interest from their members and the visitors to the QRP convention, which usually takes place at the beginning of September in the UK. So I say we're going to pop a link online to the SurveyMonkey form that you can get involved with, and to say certainly there might be some interest there, or express your interest, and maybe there might be holding an event that we look like we're going to lose, as we have with so many, as an online conference. Now we head up to our features episode. There's a feature by my friend and colleague Frank Howell, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, which discusses the futures of ham radio. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature, we've done something a little bit different. We recorded Sutton and Cheam Amateur Radio Society's club meeting on the 21st of May 2020. Now, the audio was recorded out of Zoom, so Zoom did all the processing. It's not as good a quality as I would have liked, but the information within the audio is well worth a listen. The speaker, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, or as I should give him his correct title, Professor Frank Howell, K4FMH. And Frank talks about the futures of ham radio. Futures with an S. So I hope you enjoy. And as I say, it's an interesting concept to do it this way.
Looks like it. Thank you, Frank. So, yeah, obviously, just so you're aware, we are recording this session. It's going to go out on the internet, possibly at some point in the future. Hope everyone's fit and well. Hopefully you're all doing okay in the lockdown. Getting some good thumbs up, which is great. I'm sure you're all aware, Sutton and Sheen were doing a net every Monday night. So during this lockdown, we've been doing a net Monday nights on GB3XP at 8 p.m. We've had some good attendance on that recently, so that's great. If anyone wants to join us 8 o'clock GB3XP repeater, then the more the merrier. This is the first time we've tried to do this sort of thing on Zoom. Obviously, the lockdown's gone on for a bit longer than perhaps we were expecting or hoping. We've been told by the football club we're going to be closed until at least July. So this maybe maybe a few of these sessions via Zoom. We're going to try and get things teed up, get our program back on track, but doing this sort of format rather than face to face, until we're allowed to get back together again. I won't bother with the health and safety talk tonight. We all know where the toilets are in your own house and where the fire exits are, so that's fine. We are joined tonight by members of some of our sister clubs. So we've got members of Cats, members of Dorking, and members of Crystal Palace on the call tonight. So that's nice to have you guys on. Welcome to you all. One of the things that we're looking at in Sutton and Cheam is the RSGB have announced something called the Beyond Exams programme. So I just sort of mentioned that at the start of the meeting. If anyone's interested in getting involved in that, either to learn a bit more if you just pass your test, or want to help others that have perhaps a bit more experience, then please let me know. Anyway, Martin, I'm going to hand it over to you. If you've got anything you want to say, you might have to go off mute. Hopefully you can do that yourself. Is it letting you take? There you go. Cool.
I should be off milk.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, well, good to have as many people as we have, as Chris said, in the nicest possible way. Great to have our sister clubs joining us, and this is what amateur radio is about. Unfortunately, I'm stuck in the wife's craft room because she's downstairs where I normally use the computer, so I've got all the craft junk behind me. But hey, what the hell. I've known Frank probably for about 7 or 8 years now, is it, Frank?
Probably so.
Yeah, probably so. Frank joined us on the podcast a long time, then took a little bit of an outage and came back. Frank and I are known within the podcasting community on ICQ as the naughty toddlers. So I'm not sure who leads who astray, but I'm blaming Frank because he's older than me.
I think either one of us needs leadership.
Yeah. But no. Guys, Frank's a great speaker. Very interesting to talk to him, and we're great to have you. And thanks, Frank, for doing an extra one for us. I really appreciate it. I may have to get away about 9 o'clock because I'm up at stupid o'clock tomorrow morning. So if I duck out before the end, Frank, it's not because I'm not interested. It's just difficult.
I understand.
As far as I'm concerned, everything's ticking along normally. So back to you, Chris, to host it.
Thanks, Martin. So, as you've all seen, we've got Frank on the call. Frank is, to give his proper title, Professor Frank Howell, K4FMH. Frank is a professor of sociology, retired, I believe now, at Mississippi State University. So Frank's going to give us a talk about the futures of amateur radio. So it should be a bit of a thought-provoking one, I think. If anyone's got any questions, we'll perhaps do those at the end. I'll unmute everyone at the end. If you've got any questions, perhaps you can let me know in the chat window and I can unmute you to ask them at the end if that's okay. So Frank, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Very good. Well, thank you for being here, those of you who are there. And I want to tell you very sincerely, it's a great honor to be asked by any group of hands to meet or visit electronically, share some thoughts, and I take that very seriously. I've been a professor for about 45 years, but you would never know it that I was too shy to enter a room of a number of people when I was a child. And I went into broadcasting before I went to graduate school. I think realizing that 10,000 people were listening to you stutter through the news at 9 a.m. sort of cured me out of that. So this is something I've told Chris before, that if he couldn't get a good speaker, that I would stand in until he could get one. And I think I had Bob Howell lined up, and something fell out of the wayside with Bob's schedule. So anytime I'm able to help get a good speaker, I'll be happy to do that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some things tonight that I want you to pay particular attention to the word future. There's an S on it. And I sort of make the pitch, the futures of amateur radio, a sociologist Ham's perspective. And I'll share some ideas and we can kind of talk a little bit about that. Next slide. Let me give you an idea, because I don't like to leave a group hanging. let me give you a quick overview of where we are so you don't feel like you're captured by PowerPoint. Here are the main bullet points. There are many futures. It's like Schrodinger and that cat's dead or alive. Well, there are many futures. How should we future, which is what one group calls thinking about the future. Now, we all think about the future. What am I going to have for dinner tomorrow? But this is an organized way to think about forecasting the future. So how should we go about that? When we get to the future, it's always relevant to know what's our past. And I'll give about an 8-mile-high view of some relevant history of amateur radio that at least I think is relevant for us to think about where we are today. And in how we organize, we often think about individuals, but the groups that we're in, such as the group that we have now, they are really the key components, if you will, for amateur radio. Yeah, individuals come and go, but those organizations, and they come and go too, but they are key components there. And there are forces within amateur radio that will provoke change, and there are forces outside or without of amateur radio. And recently on an episode of the ICQ podcast, Dr. Kamal Singh, former member of the RSGB, and I am a member, have been for a number of years, and thoroughly enjoy being a member across the pond. He was a board member. He had to resign because of some business activity he got into. But Dr. Singh gave a eloquent talk at RSGB. It was maybe a couple of years ago when Martin and Chris also had one about clubs. And I call that the Singh prophecy, not to overdress it, but it's a Singh prophecy. And I want to talk about what he said briefly, and then add my own compliment to that of some things I think may enhance what he has to say, because it's really worth watching. And then finally, to understand the hobby as how we future and think about our future in amateur radio. And I'll identify at the very end one future I think is very, very bright. So as Hugh Grant said, whether it's a bad thing or not, I don't know, but there you have it. So if you have the next slide, let's begin. Well, we often talk, as if there's just one future, and sometimes we've had oracles. If you watch that series on the Vikings that was on a couple of years ago, there was this blind person who had his eyes put out with fiery embers, but yet he could tell the future. And so very often we think about the future as if someone can divine the future and they've got some mystic way of understanding it. But that's not really what I'm talking about. That may work for, is the sun going to rise in the east tomorrow? And I think we can all get behind that one and be pretty accurate. When we think about non-physical objects, social change, here's point one. It's dynamic. Models of the future are dynamic. Take the COVID-19 pandemic. Why are all the models changing? Chris Murray in the state of Washington here in the States gave a pretty good model of what the news media didn't understand. And at one time I was in broadcast news and have worked with them to keep them from doing things like take 1% of 1% and get kind of stupid mathematically. So I'm kind of R1, if you will. But they didn't understand that's not, today I'm forecasting several to model he was using. Each day it was updated, so it's a step ahead forecast. And what's changing it? Individual human behavior, where they wear masks, stay socially distant, etc. So models of the future tend to be dynamic. Now, if we just said we could look at a dipole and tell if it's resonant or not, some of us may have built, that doesn't include me, I can't do that, but some of us may feel confident, hey, a 20-meter dipole, I can kind of look at it and tell you if the length's right because I've built 100 of them. Well, but in general, we don't agree that we can look at a dipole antenna and tell if it's resonant or not. What do? We take measurements. So in the World Future Society is the professional organization that studies scientific forecasts of social change. And they use the concept of futuring, how to future. So here's the punchline. There are many futures, and our knowledge of behavior and technology changes how we organize, how we act, and ultimately the future itself. And one element of what you're doing here tonight, multiple clubs joining together, is one of those actions and how we organize that can change the future. So let's go to the next slide. Now, how should we future? Well, let me ask, what's the fundamental nature of amateur radio? When we read our magazines and listen on the air, it's often bandied about, we're a technical hobby. Well, okay, we focus on technology, but imagine these two, and I've tried to put this into context of the United Kingdom. So if I get any vernacular off, please forgive me. I'm a wayward child of the British Empire. So chemists, two guys are having a pint in a pub, and a chemist walks in, and the chemist says, "Oh, I see, you're practicing chemistry." They look at him very oddly and say, "No, we're just having a friendly chat. You fancy a Guinness?" Well, who's right? I think one could make the argument, no, they are practicing chemistry. They're using chemicals in a beer or an ale. But I think most of us would also say, no, it's social behavior, and it involves chemistry. And I liken that to amateur radio. It's a technology-focused way to pass the time, but it's social behavior at its base, just like golf is, just like fishing is, just like soccer is, just like a lot of things. So, next slide. And because it's social behavior, we need to think about what are those principles. We take exams, and if we like building things, we study circuit design, and we learn what are some of the phenomena that we've figured out, and it changes somewhat over time. But Ohm's law and Hookert's law about power and a number of things like that. Well, let's think about some of those similar kinds of phenomena that's important for us in amateur radio. Often we lament how individuals are for social change. If individuals would just straighten up, it's not like it used to be. If we can fix individuals, we can fix our hobby or anything else, really, our local town, what have you. But the problem is, individuals get the way they are because of social organization and how the hobby is organized. It's that organization which invariably teaches individual how the culture and shapes their view of the hobby. We have a term for it called Elmering. It's more than technology training. If you want to start a fist fight in that bar, say, here's the only way you should ground your station. I promise a fight will break out sooner or later, particularly if there's beer. How do you solder on a PL259? How did we individually learn that? Very often we get taught the culture of the technology from our Elmer or Elmers. And so that likely we don't get taught the overall culture of the hobby. We get taught a subculture, the niche that your Elmer or Elmers tend to focus on. So technology doesn't, here's another punchline, technology doesn't exist in a social vacuum. Each changes the other. And we've argued for years, when I taught philosophy of science, I used to come in one lecture with a lab coat because I'm a scientist. I got a lab coat. We've got these universal laws. And what's happened since we've sent missiles and things out into space? We find that some of those laws that we thought were immutable here on the Earth work a little different. We've got that big thing over in Europe, trying to find the magic particle to figure out how that works. So we're not different in thinking about this in terms of social science. We learned that technology affects the social, and the social affects the technology. I won't ask for a show of hands, but how many of you build your current favorite rig? How many of you built it? Some of you might. Some of you might have gotten some assistance from Asher Forehand or BitX to help build it. Hans Summers. Well, why don't we do that? The technology has changed, and we typically don't have the understanding and the technical ability to design and build many of those things. But back in the early days, most people did. And you still hear today some of our graybeard Elmer saying, that's real ham radio. We're going to get into real ham radio with the next slide. Now, let's think about how we got where we are today. Now, the origins of amateur radio were organic. That is, it was from the ground up. Many individuals were experimenting and sharing info. We didn't have a cultural template for how to do ham radio. No RSGB, no ARL, and there really weren't that many organized groups. One of the little side projects, I once had a laboratory. I never got over it. So I used to have a white marker board in my lab, and I would always have the to-do list literally on my drawing board. And one of the things I have in studying amateur radio is I've gone back in the U.S. I'd be interested to know if you have this in the United Kingdom. I've got all the original call lists and where they were licensed. And I'm going to go back to the very first licenses given by the FCC, and I'm going to put them on maps. And I want to see where they started and where they sprang up. I wonder if where amateur radio in the U.S. started has active clubs today. If we use that logic, where would they all start? It would all start in Dayton, because that's the biggest club in the United States. So it was organic. It was hams deciding to get together. Well, what was our original transmission mode? Well, it was CW, Morse code. Now, the culture around early ham radio reflected that technology, but it also reflected the organic organization around the mode of transmission and that mode of operation. The concept of the crystal. We didn't have a VFO then. You got crystals. Sometimes you would scrape them a little bit to change the frequency. You trade and barter them. They do that with baseball cards or perhaps cricket cards if you have those and that kind of thing. So that was the technology shaping that culture. Later came AM voice transmission, followed by those silly sidebenders, or as I learned at 8 years of age, listening on a big piece of furniture in my grandmother's living room. You didn't go in the living room unless somebody died or you had company. And I got her permission to go in her living room as a small child and listen to her RCA radio. It had the green winking eye. You tuned it in and winked at you. And I heard these people, and I could never tune them in. It had no BFO. Well, they were typically called mushmouths by the AM operators. Did you have that in the United Kingdom? Chris, you can give me an up or down.
Did we have a what, sorry, Frank?
Did you have a controversy back in history when sideband came in? Did the AMers really put down the sideband?
I believe so. Martin will be able to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case, Martin, wasn't it? You told me this before.
Yeah, and so what is that? That's not the technology. That's not the technology doing that. That's us. We're doing that because we've adapted our culture around the technology. Now, since then, yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, because Chris has just unmuted me. Sideband happened, I believe, because it was before I was in the hobby, around about the early 60s. And I remember talking to an early G3, and he said to me, Martin, I used to be a bad boy in the hobby. He said, because I was working SSB when everybody was on AM and they hated me. You know,
it's almost as bad as Citizens Band. It wasn't, not quite, but almost. Right. So you see the culture that emerged, and when we had these different modes that came about, we had people who distinguished themselves. I'm an AM. I'm a CW person. This sideband is terrific. The culture became more complex, but we did not become more pluralistic and accepting of these different groups in terms of our social norms. Hams begin to specialize. Now, that's not unusual in a growing hobby. It happens in many hobbies. You have specialties. And in many sciences today, if you said, I'm a physicist, I'm a chemist, I'm a biologist, I'm a sociologist, I'm a statistician, the next question, if you're talking to a fellow practitioner of that, is, yeah, okay, so you're a physicist, but what do you do? Oh, I'm an astrophysicist. Oh, then what do you do? Oh, I study quasars and gamma ray bursts. Oh, now I know what you do. And that's also the kind of thing that I think that we have gone through. So it is not unusual, but it has longer term consequences when we specialize without adopting pluralism as one of our values, and we haven't done that. Next slide. So we have today we have a very diverse and growing set of transmission modes. And what do we hear, at least over here in the States? That Joe Taylor, he can take that Nobel Prize in physics, and, well, I won't say what you can hear him. They say he can do it. With FT8 is running amateur radio. It's got nothing to do with the technology. It's got to do with our culture. So groups of hams often make claims. And if you don't think that history I just talked about isn't real or isn't present, let's walk through this. There are claims that different groups of ham make that some activities are more true to what amateur radio is than others. Well, this isn't unique to amateur radio. It isn't technology. It's social behavior. And it's tradition that can inspire us. Here in the States, I'm a flunky for the ARL. I'm an assistant director of one of the divisions covering 4 states of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Tennessee. So I R1 way down the food chain. But we really brag on this guy who invented the Gatling gun. And oh, by the way, Hiram Percy Maxim also started the Amateur Radio Relay League. And we really put him up as the end-all and be-all, except when he used the phrase 73s with apostrophe S, because that's also part of the claim today. That's not accurate. Martin, Chris, I'm on the case. I'm talking to the American Linguistic Society. I want to get to the bottom of the 73 or 73s, but more to come on that later. But I just want to sort of bring that out. And I'm ignorant about the RSGB, United Kingdom, and the analogs. You hopefully can identify some of those. But when we have tradition that inspires us, if we take it too far, it can stifle our hobby, because then it becomes ritualism. And I dare say there are many nets. Thanks, Stuart. I appreciate that. But we'll see. That 73 versus 73s is just like telling people there's one way to ground your station. A fist fight will break out in the pub. We're going to see what people who study linguistics says about that. Now, when it becomes ritualism for nets, for example, my club has a net. We have gone away from our emergency format, our Aries net here in the United States, to just a club net. We've tried to have a topic of the week. What's your favorite HF rig? Or what have you done? You know, we come up with these ideas. We've done that 6 months, and most of the people just want to check in. I got no comment. I'm a battery power. Boom, go. Well, we've changed that, or tried to change it, but the culture won't let us, you know, and so that's what I'm getting at. Ritualism is when we practice something based on tradition, but it doesn't have much meaning any longer, and yet we hold on to it with all our might. You know, and so some of these vestiges of what I'm kind of joking here about, this change really keeps us from integrating from everyone into the hobby. The rate of change, as the hobby has changed based upon technical diversity and specialization, the rate of change is such like I can't keep up. I have to specialize because I can't learn about A, B, and C, when back in the earlier days, a ham knew all ham radio. So this rate of change keeps integration of people into the hobby at a lower point. And it creates social diversity and a lack of integration into common culture. Well, how does that work? We play around here with 73s, and you know that's one that's pretty common. But if you talk, I don't know if anybody's into satellites and Earth bounce, but let's just assume that nobody in this group would be. And if I came out with my chitter chatter with all the little acronyms and terms of Earth, Moon, Earth bounce, if you didn't practice it, you say, what's that guy saying? What's he talking about? See, we have this terminology. We have specialized groups. We have specialized media outlets and so forth, to the point that many hams say, I don't care about reading QST or Redcom. There's only one thing in that for me that's of interest. Oh, wait a minute. I thought you were a ham. That gets back to the physicist, and you don't know what he or she does till you find out he studies gamma ray burst. We specialized ourselves out of a certain sense of commonality. Now I want to go to the next slide. I want to talk about how this social circuit works. Now, how does that work? Martin says this will be on the test whenever y'all give it. So just joking, just kidding. Yeah, been a professor. It takes a while to rub off. Now, what's our tolerance for social change when we become more diverse technologically? We haven't done that well on that. It varies. Now, has that technological change changed our use of technology collectively? How many of you do a little bit of it all? I'm going to say there are more specialists than there are generalists. And I'm not saying that everybody should be a generalist. You know, I go to a general practitioner as a surgeon or as a doctor, every 6 months to check my health. But he very quickly routes me over to a urologist if I'm having a problem there, or a kidney doctor, or a liver doctor if my enzymes aren't right, or what have you. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with specialization. It simply has consequences if we don't have tolerance for one another. Here's an equation. Diversity without tolerance produces polarization. Just like you're doing right now, what are you doing? You've got multiple clubs, and I love the acronym CATCH, by the way, one of my favorite plays. And Crystal Palace is the name of the semi-secret area out in the Rocky Mountains, back when I had a NASA security clearance, where it's ground control for nuclear war will be in Crystal Palace. So I love the name. So what are you doing? You are doing something in a cooperative fashion, and that reduces polarization. Instead, you could say, hey, Sutton and Sheen's just, the bomb. They are better than CATCH and Crystal Palace and the other codes, and we're not letting them in. We're going to have this stupid guy from the States by ourselves. Have clubs that do that kind of thing. No, you can't come in. We're special. So when you cooperate, you tend to reduce that polarization. And you tend to, when you cooperate, increase your tolerance of other people. Competition, gee, do we have that in contesting? Oh, you bet. There are people that don't want to make their log public because it might show one of their competitors where they go at what time, what they're listening to, and things like that. The competition among groups reduces cooperation. You don't cooperate to compete. Now, we're somewhat at that point now. It's not just about contesting per se. I don't know what the last time RSGB and the United Kingdom went through some band plan assessments. You may be dealing with that on some digital modes and things like that. We are here in the States. That's a scarce resource. One of the scarcest resources we have are what frequency allocations we have. And so the specialists are going to fight and compete over who gets access, who gets their share. And right now, you've got the Morse code operators in the States up in arms because they're losing, they think, some of their frequencies to digital, and so on and so on. And what about those AMers? After all, we're real hams. We were here before you sidebanders, and we don't, we need to have our frequencies there too. So that kind of shucking and jiving, if you will, in terms of competition, prevents tolerance, it reduces cooperation, and it increases polarization. Now, these little social science terms about groups and how they relate to individuals, that's not a binary thing. Think a potentiometer, not an on and off switch. But that's some of the social circuits, if you will, that shape our hobby. Next slide. Well, all of these can be seen in the ubiquitous questions. Who are real hams? One of my friends from Atlanta, where I was licensed, I lived over there for a few years and worked down at the Capitol in Atlanta. Dick Bentley, he has a column, or did, I think they've done away with it, called Strays on EHAM. And it's just sort of these little odd comments. And Dick sent me a note, says, Frank, send me something. I just don't have any, nobody's sending me anything. So I thought, okay, real hams are ... anyone with a valid license. No brainer, right? I mean, vanilla ice cream, no cherries on top. How do you get upset at that? Bread with no jam. I got hate mail. I literally got hate mail and threatened me personally to shoot me with a bolt from a crossbow. There was a guy who trains, he's a falconer. He trains falcons in North Carolina. And if you ever saw me, he was going to shoot me with his crossbow. Don't think that's a live wire. That's like one of the old All-American 5 radios where AC is live on the chassis if you got it plugged in the wall the wrong way. You don't think these things operate and are real? Who are real hams? By the way, what's the answer that most people get? Real hams use CW. That's what the belief is. Okay. Now, is that activity on network radio? Is that real ham radio? Well, some people don't think so. Some people don't think Link Computers is real ham radio. Is that the technology? No. It's what we think of the technology and what we think of ourselves. And so that's the epitome of all those things that I talked about in the previous slide come out about these strongly held beliefs. And if you can only use RF in transmission without any assistance, as in cell phones, so if you believe that, that's not real radio. Well, if you had a Martian who landed here and they looked at this and they would think, well, how did hams get to do whatever it is? They got to do that because hams did that. Therefore, isn't real ham radio what some large number of hams actually do, almost by definition? Now, that's not what many of us believe, but that's kind of a philosopher who studies logic would say that. What's ham radio? Whatever a lot of licensed hams do. So we don't have a lot of tolerance for that collectively. And I'm not preaching about that or not. I'm just saying this is how you find out the dipole's resonance. You look at these elements of group. So our collective lack of tolerance, in my view as a sociologist, is one of our main roadblocks in this activity called amateur radio. It's analogous to the heart disease of hardening of the arteries where plaque builds up. It's what I call hardening of the category. I'm a CW guy, and Richard's going to agree with me because I do CW. You know, I saw you hold your hand up earlier, Richard, so I'm going to assume you're going to agree with me. See, if we have those beliefs, we put ourselves in these categories, and we put ourselves in these categories, then we divide our collective power into a whole lot of different tribes. You know, I will say this, old chap, old buddy, old pal, if all the Native American tribes had banded together, y'all might have turned around those ships and headed back home to Maryville, England, because the problem was they weren't together either. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. Just trying to make a few points here. Hardening of the categories results from this club. Now, one of those forces within and without that affect amateur radio. Let's focus on ourselves for a moment. The best data in the U.S., and I conducted that study, and I hadn't found anything any larger, so I'm going to just say it's the best, even though it may be bad at heart. No more than about 50% of ARL members are currently members of a club. Why is that? Well, we asked them, and all the things they said really amounted to poor leadership. Why do we have poor leadership in ham clubs? Do we have any training for leadership? Do clubs talk about that with members? Here's the real question. Let's see, I've got a note here. Let's see, Martin, M1MRB, Frank, pause after this next one until I get 12 volunteers. Okay, are you willing to serve in an official club leadership position? Now, Martin wants me just to wait until he gets, I think, 20. Would you take 10, Martin? Well, why is that? Well, there's what we typically call an 80-20 rule. 20% folks will get engaged, 80% won't. Whose club is it? Oh, it's the leadership's club, and I'm just coming in to enjoy the ice cream and the cherry on top. And we tend to have that view about clubs. The problem with that is that we tend to have burnout if the 80% remain takers. Now, so what about clubs? Clubs are that key component on our circuit board that give life to us. From other surveys I've done, people who are hams who are members of clubs have tried newer technology quicker than those who aren't. They know more about new technology than those who aren't members of clubs. And it's something that we learn a lot about. So if we didn't have clubs, we might not have the activity that we have today. And yet we often complain we have repeaters and we don't hear people on. Now, Martin, M1MRB, has talked about this at RSGB in his talk, Grow, Decline, or Disappear. And he and Chris held a very good forum at RSGB. I think, was it 2 years ago?
It was last year, Frank.
Okay, last year. My, how time flies. It's an excellent video, and it's on the podcast. And there was a member of that group, and I've forgive me, because I've actually communicated with him directly, but I forget his name. He had the concept of clubs or hubs. Tonight, you're acting in a hub. Now, you have a leader club in Sutton and Sheen, but you're leveraging the fact that there's a speaker who's going to aggravate you for a little while with some ideas, and you're putting that together. And so the gentleman who talked in that same group, it's on that same video, about clubs or hubs, very innovative idea, because how can we then leverage those activities to have a good club environment that engages members to continue to learn? I don't know about on your side of the pond. People don't like to come to a club meeting and hear the secretary's minutes and argue about where the comma should be, or the fact that they really don't have much money in the bank and that be it. If they don't learn something or get engaged, whether it's informal discussion over a meal or a chat or things like that. I'm vice president for our programming and for my local club, and we're like you. We're having to do things, on electronically. We can't meet. The building that we meet in is actually closed because of the shutdown. So, what do you do to get people to engage? I started a thing called a 3-minute update, and I would get the treasurer to randomly pick 3 people from the sign-in sheet, and they would stand up and take 1 minute to say, what have they done since the last month? Martin does this on the ICQ podcast each fortnight with the presenters. Hey, what have you been up to? And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an email from somebody look me up on QRZ or the ICQ podcast saying, hey, you mentioned X, and could you send me more information? Or I used to do X, and I'm wondering what the latest is, or I did this and just wanted to share it with you. Wonderful. That little activity has proven to be very good. So what do you do to leverage activities? And the way we organize is important. Now, one of Martin's concepts, and if I got this correct, Martin, some clubs might need to disappear. Why is it? My view is because they've gone into extreme ritualism. They meet just to meet. Everybody's bored. New people don't come in. Why? Because they're boring, and they're doing it because they've always done it. Now, you'll get some people who, I'm 67, so in my age bracket and beyond, they're doing it. It's purely a social activity, and they just happen to be hams. No programs, etc. So that's another example of ritualism. So clubs can emerge, and I'm a big believer in that, hey, if nobody wants to serve in the leadership mode, and that's an ongoing process, let's don't have the club anymore, because that ritualism doesn't help new people because they think the hobby's dead. Next slide. Wow. That looks like a fish that, go back one. That looks like a fish somebody ate, and these are the bones. Well, what this is what, in my discipline, we call a life course, and this gets more sophisticated. But think for a moment about what tends to happen, and there are variations. I mean, people aren't the same. What tends to happen at these 5-year age intervals? What are people engaged in their life? Take ham radio out of it. we complain about not getting new members into the hobby. Well, look at that 10 to 15 to 25. Up in Starkville, where MFJ is located, my former club, the Magnolia Club, I had served as president of that when there were 4 members, and I was able to get it back up to about 25 after a couple of years. They are just going great, much better than I ever did while I was there. And they had a 12-year-old that went from technician to extra. 12 years. Wow. And he's getting a lot of support. But that's unusual. So you think about getting young people in. What are young people doing today that when you hear the old timers say, oh, I had an uncle who taught me ham radio, or my father was in ham radio, or whatever. What's different about that age period today than it was 50 years ago? There is so much engagement of young people in many, many activities. Better transportation to get them there. If any of you listening have young children or teenage children who don't drive, you know what your job is. It is chauffeur. All the activities that are situated around schools really cut down the availability of time. So we can go through that. When on that chart, do you have people who are at their peak earning period, who tend to have an empty nest at home, and they're getting ready to retire, and they got some more free time on their hands because they may have moved up in the world that they practice their profession in, so they get a little more flex. When is that? Well, that's somewhere around 50 to 60. And guess what? The late in life hams, I'm one of them. I got interested in ham radio at 8 years old, looking at that little green eye of my grandmother. But I only got a license at 58. I was around broadcasting, built 2 radio stations. I read QST magazine. Just never took the time to get a license. So when you think about that, those are some of the fastest growing hams in the States. They're growing about 4% a year for a late in life ham. So I just want to make a point here with this little diagram. That's not good or bad individual. It's not good or bad hobby. It's got things that have nothing to do with the hobby, but life and culture has changed. Now, when in the life course somebody becomes a ham, changes their outlook on the hobby, we've all seen people that says, I was a ham since I was 12 years old, and I know more than you, and if you'll shut up, I'll tell you all about it. Now, they may do it in a much nicer way, but length of time in the hobby, particularly if you were there early, tenure tends to be part of our culture and seen be associated with knowledge. And yet we also know some of us old timers that if they change the frequency on the radio, they may not get it back because they've kind of forgot a lot of those things. So in reality, that's not always true. But one of our big things here is aging. You know, we tend to see the graying of amateur radio. I will tell you, I've got a 2-part article in the National Contesting Journal in the fall and winter 2020 issues. They'll own the copyright, but Martin, I'll make sure I get a copy to you. I can certainly share my preprint to you if that's of interest. And I think you'll see some data, at least from the United States, hams, members of ARL, and that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about there. The amateur radio, I want to make this as a point, and we'll go to the next slide. Amateur radio is a leisure time activity. We study ham use. We study time use here in this country, and we have a time use study that's magnificent, one of the best survey series that we have. In the United States, those who are 15 years and older spend an average of 5 hours a week in leisure and sport. 60% of that time is watching television. I make the point in this NCJ article, our biggest enemy is television. And that includes us. I find myself wanting to watch a program with my wife. I've got a net that's going to kick off at 8 p.m. And my wife has learned to tolerate that. My phone will pop up. I go, put that on pause. I'll be back. You know. So keep in mind, there are things outside the hobby that have changed the context that we're in. Next slide. Okay, Dr. Kamal Singh made a presentation, which I think is magnificent. He challenged us to reclaim our relevancy to the world. His argument is that the latest industrial revolution, analog to digital, really left amateur radio behind. I highly recommend that you look at his talk on YouTube. I agree with Richard. To everyone, I'm going to get there in just a moment. You just quick on the draw, sir. I highly recommend it. Let's go to the next slide. I want to compliment what I call the Singh prophecy. Relevant to whom? You know, he makes a little bit of a universal, and I don't think he means it this way, but he just taking what he said. You know, relevant. We're not relevant. We're relevant to whom? You know, we're breathing and eating is relevant to everyone. Now let's then go down. Who's ham radio got to be relevant to? We have to be relevant to Ofcom, to FCC, or we don't get any frequencies. So we got to be relevant there. We have to be relevant to a strategic market, and we could go on and talk about that. So relevancy is strategic, not universal. Number two, should amateur radio, as he said, be seen as a portal to only engineering education? We've got a lot of famous people who are hams. There's a famous person, very famous person in the United Kingdom, who's not a ham but a fan of amateur radio, and you can pick Martin's brain over a pint for that one. We celebrate that all the time, and very few of those are engineers. So I think we're stronger if the hobby attracts people from all sectors, not just engineering. Nothing against engineering, but the reality is amateur radio simply could not stop that electronics revolution that Kamal says left us behind. We helped make it, not for ham radio, but for us. Bob Whitty here in the States, WITTE, worked for Hewlett-Packard, designed some of the wonderful Hewlett-Packard gear, and off camera to my left, I've got one of the devices that he designed, and his article in the HP Journal describes the thinking behind it. And I've gotten to know him a bit. He was a ham. So many hams helped make that revolution, but it's not our fault that has exploded. But we can find our lane, as Dr. Singh says, and we can make contributions. For example, Dr. Jack Purdom here in the States, along with Asher Forehand in India, collaborating with the University of Florida to make an open source ventilator for the COVID pandemic. And there are others. One of the key elements about futuring that's important to the method is, okay, you fear that X is going to happen. That is, all of our hams are dying and we're going to just stop growing. All right, let's say that happens. Now what does the world look like? Well, what would it be like if we stopped growing and the numbers significantly declined? You know, we're at an all-time high here in the States, 750,000 plus hams. Well, what was it like earlier in history? We grew. We were always given frequencies that had little to no commercial value. We always had a dog's breakfast to play with, 200 meters and down. So we cry a lot about we're going to lose our privileges and our frequencies. We might. I hope we don't. But if we do, didn't we survive that before? Next slide. Now, in framing this with you, and I'll try to wind up here pretty quickly, understanding the hobby is our hook to determining which of those plural futures we want. Now, we often have what I call personal windshields. You know, like we drive our car, you know, and we see things through our windshield. We typically understand amateur radio by what we see. Well, I've never seen anybody do that. Oh, and everybody I know does that. Well, who's right? Well, they have no way of knowing. That gives us siloed thinking, and what does that give us? Polarization. We don't even know what the average age of our licensed hams are. We need much better scientific data about amateur radio, licensed hams, and then groups like clubs. And this also includes the commercial amateur radio sector. People right now are mad with flex radio systems. Why? They're not getting their 6,000 series radio shipped to them in time. Are they sorry out there in Austin, Texas? They got part of $1 billion contract with the U.S. Air Force, with Raytheon, to help use their technology to do the next gen radio communications in HF for the military. Is that good or bad? Wait a minute. Dr. Singh said make ourselves relevant. The military thought one of our companies is pretty doggone relevant. So we need to understand that commercial sector in addition. Well, how do we get there? I've been pushing in here in the U.S. to the ARL for a research working committee, research working group. I'm told at the June board meeting that will be up. It's already been vetted. I'm told that'll be approved. And I'm told by my division director I'll be the statistical consultant. I'll believe that when I see it. That's just my take on the ARL. I would encourage you to push the RSGB to have a research working committee. Don't take no for an answer. The president, and I forget his name, I think John's his first name, I heard him on a podcast recently, says, they've been doing some of these opt-in surveys every couple of years, but he says they don't have anybody that really understands how to analyze. And there are many statisticians. There are many people in the United Kingdom. I'm friends with a bunch of statisticians in the United Kingdom, and they're some of the best in the world that they're special. Some of them could be hams. I don't know. But I'll even volunteer to help across the pond. I'm an RSGB member. But if we don't collect data, we won't know. Do we know where the licensure database is? I've taken the FCC database and geocoded them, put them on maps from 2000 to present day. There are some issues. Yeah, and so it looks like there's a new president from the one who said that. Thanks. Now, there's some issues in the United Kingdom about your addresses and things. My point is, if you don't push to collect new data, the RSGB will probably be status quo, just like the ARL. But finally, the recruitment of others into amateur radio is going to require us to do something that we haven't been willing to do in the past. And that's for us to change what we old-timers think, say, and do for young people. Are you willing to do that? Next slide. One future for amateur radio, I think, is very, very bright. We're in a renaissance period for experimenting and building. And hey, that's how we all got started, right? Building radios and cheap electronics, the maker movement. Richard was early on. A lot of the makers are gamers. I just bought a Dell Precision 7910. It's about 4 years old. A lot of the gamers, I paid $900 US for it. Got 2 processors, 16 cores. It's got an 8 gig video card. It's got 128 gigs RAM. Wah, 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 wah. It'll probably lift my roof. Certainly ought to make coffee, right? So makers are in that zone of doing what we hams did. And I think Dr. Singh was capturing that sentiment. It's a natural chemistry for sparking interest by young people in ham radio. Some of them are using RF. They're using over in the States, the unlicensed Part 15 to do a lot of cool things, particularly with robotics. Well, we need to think about reaching them where they are rather than expecting them to come to us. A sociologist named Ray Oldham coined the term third places. Family or home is the first place, work is the second place, and all those third places, pubs, churches, other groups that you meet people writ large in. Where are young people's third places? And schools are great. I spent most of my life in schools, but schools are complicated today. It's very hard, but yet what we typically do, we solve that by we get a club in a school. All right, I'm looking at the blokes here, looking back at me and looking at your age. And what a wonderful group. Now, you show up at the schoolmaster's office. Hey, we want you to turn your little kids over to us in the afternoon. We're going to show them some stuff. How's that going to turn out? If that person says, yeah, I hear you, Carl. I appreciate that comment. And I'm not saying schools don't work. But it's like the screwdriver antenna. When you put 100 watts in, what do you get out of the area? You can put some effort into schools and you will get some things out. But it's not the only third place. Here in the United States, the Gallup Survey Organization reported that last year, the one place that is the common cultural crossroads in the United States, I don't know what it is in Great Britain, is libraries, public libraries. You have more women there and you have more young people there. Now, wait a minute. Isn't the ARL say that's who we're trying to recruit? Find them where they are. How often you may have something at the rally for amateur radio, but how often do you have a ham radio booth that you probably have to pay for, and probably more than we pay at amateur rallies? Get a booth for presentation at a gamer or maker conference. Get there. Don't stay here. That may work for dogs and other pets, but it doesn't work for potential young hams because they don't have to. That dog may want to get fed tonight, so that dog will probably do tricks for you. Next slide. Here's the punchline. We need to facilitate youth-driven clubs in tandem with our adult-driven. Now, trust me, I've been around kids for 45 years. I've been teaching young people. They don't want to sit at our knee. Now, I got a granddaughter. She will tolerate me wanting to corral her in my easy chair and listen to life as it were. They do that because they love you and they're your kid. But the random young person, most of them really doesn't want to just sit at your knee and listen to how you did it with something called Litz wire, galena crystals, and a wire. If you don't believe it, the ICQ podcast episode 319 has an interview with a 15-year-old in Illinois here in the U.S. who started the Illinois Young Ham Club. He's kind of caught fire with it. And he's a real nice kid. He's a very nice guy. He didn't want to be offensive, but he told me on the interview and then off mic, yeah, I mean, young people just don't want to hang with you guys. I mean, yeah, we'll do it some, but we kind of want to be shown, give us the pieces, let us get engaged. He didn't say this, but I do. And then get the hell out of their way until they ask for something. When we get them engaged, they will get active. Now, I'm going to roll the script back to the age of Radio Caroline. And what was the spirit that gave rise to Radio Caroline? Wouldn't we have wanted to be given an opportunity and then get the heck out of our way? Wouldn't we wanted to have been engaged? And that's part of what I'm saying. Let's soften our categories when it comes to recruiting young people. Next slide. Now, that future that I just described is partly yours to make. It's not fundamentally different than building a repeater site. I'm on top of a hospital here in Jackson, Mississippi, and putting up a fusion repeater with Thomas Gandy, who is an engineer with AT&T. What we have to do is try to learn more and pay attention to the appropriate social circuits shaping the organization behavior of amateur radio. Next slide. So thanks for listening. Here's my contact information. You can look at the ICQ podcast. You know, I've mentioned ICQ podcast a lot. Martin, be sure to tell Colin I really gave the pitch here as a company guy. So I'll be happy to entertain questions. I ran a little bit longer than I had timed it, 56 minutes. I wanted to shoot for 40, so I apologize. But I'll be happy to take questions.
Frank, thank you very much. Let me just, has anybody got any, there's a few questions, there are a few things in the chat window there, but if anyone's got any questions, you should now be able to unmute yourself, so please feel free to fire away. Just
quickly, Frank, Colin will probably pay you the usual rate. Hi.
Good. I'm looking forward. I'm building my Christmas fund. You know, a sock with coal in
it. Yeah. And listen, I'm going to have to duck out of the question stage because I've got to go, Frank. But being here all the time, even though I've moved to me video a couple of times, very good talk. Thank you very much for doing it for us. I'm going to
let you. And Martin, I want to tell you, 73 is one to you and Carol.
Yeah. Well, she'll be up in a minute in the aircraft room wanting to know why I haven't got my head down because I'm up at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. So,
yeah. Take care.
Listen, thanks, Frank. And I'll leave it in Chris's capable hands. And guys, great to have you all on. I think we counted 26, wasn't it, Chris?
Yeah, 26. I think about that. A couple of duplicates, so probably about 24, something like that. Yeah, but yeah, quite a few.
Yeah, and for a first kickoff, I think that's good. And thanks to all the people from the other clubs who joined us. You know, let's share this. It's a hobby. Well, we don't have to fight each other. It's a hobby. Let's share the knowledge. And with that, I'm going to say 73 to you all. And we'll catch you again soon. Frank, I'll try and catch up with you at some point in time over the weekend, yeah?
Sounds good.
Yeah. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Martin. So has anybody else got any questions? Obviously, there's a lot of material that Frank covered there. A lot of it was thought-provoking. Richard, I see you come off mute. Have you got anything?
Yeah, just a couple of points to make, really. One of the things he said earlier, very early on, diversity without tolerance equals polarization. I think that really does describe the attitude of, I'm going to put it, the club management in a number of clubs where they are looking back to what they were in the 50s and 60s rather than what they are now. And another point really, I think, I've always banged on about and had great big public arguments at RSGB AGMs with the, well, not so much the president, but the general manager, a particular general manager, is here in the UK, the presentation, the publicity, public PR of the hobby, it's almost non-existent. Now, my background's Polish, and if you go to Eastern Europe, Poland, Russia, Czech, that way sort of eastwards, amateur radio is known about everywhere. Schools, right, in Poland it's got a very big link with schools and scouts, but that goes back historically to the 1920s and the War of Independence and things like that. But you go to Eastern Europe and sort of top end of Scandinavia, Nordic Europe, amateur radio it's normal. It's something you can mention and talk about, and it's known about in schools and clubs and things like this. It's sort of once you get west of Germany that it seems to, especially here in the UK, it's zero, it's hidden. It's something you hear the comment of, oh, I didn't realise that was still going.
Right.
And I'll leave it to anyone else to throw a threepence in over that.
Richard, let me just echo what you said, and that I want to try to code this, and you'll figure out why I'm doing it. Let me just say this: you can do the math and figure out who the most famous ham operator in the state of Mississippi is. Okay, easily. He was told by a club in our capital that he wasn't welcome because he was a no-code tech. So that lack of tolerance. Now, gee, they would love to have this person in their club, and he's given a talk to them, but I don't think they'll ever see a dime of his dues as official membership. And it's a shame when those actions by some back in the day linger on. So we could probably all parse that, Richard. But thank you for the comment. I appreciate it very much.
Well, I remember as a young 17-year-old, when I first got my amateur radio license here in the UK, I went to a local club. In those days, we had Class A and Class B licenses. And Class A was a real license holder who had done technical exam and a Morse code test. And the Class B license holder had just done the technical exam, no Morse code test. I was a Class B, and I went to a local club, which was in walking distance of my mother's home, knocked on the door, introduced myself at a club evening, and was basically told, way to great laughter, to sling my hook, come back when I'd got a real amateur radio license. In other words, a Class A. At the time, I was working as an engineer on a radio station at Leafield. I had actually, by accident, employers had taught us Morse to 22 words a minute maritime standard, because we were being trained as electronics officers on ships. It's only when they realised they'd given us a wrong course they stopped. But I never ever took a test as an amateur and really got to grips with it. I stuck with teleprinter because that's what I work, and I like data. That's it. Never forgotten the attitude of that club. When I heard a few years ago that it had completely and utterly folded into the dirt, I sort of thought, shame that it actually took so long, 40, 50 years. Attitude, I think, is the wrong one to have. More welcoming, not one of us.
Well, you see my phrase, hardening of the categories. And when they fossilize, that lack of tolerance and the polarization. And that's why we're not stronger, at least in the state, because we tend to be polarized. Anyway, that's my thought. Thanks for the comment. Other questions or comments?
No, I can understand that, as I hold an extra up in Indiana. And my club meets there originally, when things changed, it was, are you a 20 words a minute man? And you'll understand that.
I understand that. Yeah, I certainly do.
Thanks, Richard. Has anybody else got any questions or want to make any comments or disagree with what Frank said, even?
Feel free to.
I'll say my thing.
Go on then, Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Okay, so I'm 22. I've been doing this since I was, 12, 13. And it's funny that you mentioned about the TV, and I think it was Richard that said about gaming, because part of the reason I got into this was partly because my dad said it was a good idea, which I'm sure is how a lot of people got into things like this. But also for me, now I'm older, and I'm not just doing it because my dad does it. For me, it was always a thing apart from the internet, and it was like almost like an escape from it, because our lives are so built around that now. Especially now I work in it as well. So, you spend 8 hours a day on the computer at work, and then you spend another 4 hours at home after work, and it gets a bit much. And then, since this COVID thing's been happening, and I've been stuck in my flat, sometimes I've got a receiver. I can't do any transmitting from here because I can't put an antenna up. But I've got a receiver, and I've just been listening to that. And like I say, it's I think for people my age that I've spoken to, I've convinced a few people to get into it, because people my age, when you really get through to them, they are looking for that kind of escape from the so-called sort of technological aspect, because there's a lot of it, and sometimes you just main ways. Again, I realize this isn't everyone, and I don't want to do the whole categorization thing, but for me, the most exciting thing about ham radio is sort of going off into the field and setting up an antenna and a tent.
Portable operations, yeah.
Yeah, because for me, that was an escape from just being on the computer all the time.
Joe, you make some great comments. And here's what I think is the good thing and the sad thing. The good thing is what you just told us. Your biography. If you ever listen to Eric Guth on QSO Today, he's got these structured biographies. And you learn a lot about the history of hams. The sad part of what you're telling us is we have no earthly idea how many people like you there are, because we don't collect good data. And I get a little frustrated perhaps with ARL and getting them to think about, if you put, we got a youth program, we're kind of going to put them over to the side. My strategy, Joe, and I would encourage you and others who want to speak out, if ARL wants to recruit young people, why don't they put one on the board? I promise you, that will get more done. So I appreciate your comments, and having been very, very involved in computing technology, I was able to build 3 computer networks available in 60 countries in 1983 on ASCII terminal, the proof of concept. And it's such a blend, isn't it? That world and what you can do in amateur radio. There is such a
definitely, yeah.
Yes, very simpatico. Very simpatico. I see Stuart there. It looks like he has got Braveheart coming at me. I'm looking at his background. It looks like Mel Gibson in Braveheart.
I think Stuart might have stepped away actually, but
okay.
Is anybody else? Thank you, Joe, for the comments there. Does anybody else want to? Well, we got Frank on. Anybody else want to chip in?
David, I've been watching you. I think you got something to say. David Millie?
Maybe.
It looks like he's muted himself.
I'm not sure we can hear David actually.
Need to unmute.
There we go.
No, still muted. I think it's because he's on his iPad and his desktop at the same time.
Okay.
I might be able to do it remotely if that's what he wants me to do. Possibly not.
Okay. I see John Rogers, and John, I want you to know, I'm usually like this, and I say that's your lighting scheme, and I'm like Joe. I worked around screens and computers so much, I wanted the lights down because it's easier on your eyes. Tell us something. What are your thoughts?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Well, I've recently joined QCWA. It's called the Century Wireless Association, which is an American club.
Right.
We have the UK equivalent of the Radio Amateurs Old Timers Association. And when you're trying to find people who have I'm 57. I've been involved with amateur radio since I was 5. I'm a third-gen radio ham.
Yeah.
But
you got a tremendous culture in your family for amateur radio, third generation.
Thank you. Clubs like Radio Amateur Old Timers, they were basically dealing with when I was in the war, this is what we did, etc., etc. At this time, okay, it's 2020 with 75th anniversary of VE Day, but you don't want that pumped to you every single year. QCWA does a very neat thing. It actually gives grants to people who are at college, not necessarily engineering, who are radio amateurs. We don't do this sort of thing over here. Occasionally you get the one engineer per year. There's a big engineering competition, and it's only about £1,000, but there's no commitment for it either. The RSGB have a youth team. We don't hear much of them at all. I'm not a member of the RSGB, except when I want something, which is usually cheap books. I'm a member of the ARL. I'm a member of the WIA. I'm also the chairman of the Cats Club, but that's another story. So Frank said about getting a youth member or a young person on the board of the RSGB. I noticed there's some very new call signs. I'm hoping they're going to start kicking in and say, we need to bring other people in. I don't know.
Well, you have some great points, and you come from a background, if you will, that certainly in the States there are, I don't know how many third generation, but there's many second generation. And so you come at it with a slice of that culture that's very important. Let me make a couple of things. I don't want anybody to think that my comments were throwing stones. You know, as a sociologist, just like a brain surgeon, if you're a brain surgeon, you're going to deal with guts and gooey things, and you don't turn your stomach over. So, you know, as a sociologist, you look at these things. It may sound like you're preaching or whatever. You're simply trying to be analytical. So I want to make sure that people take my observations as certainly attempted objectivity in terms of observation. But Dave, I want to make a point. There's a famous book in the U.S. called "Who Moved My Cheese?" And it was one of these little management books, and and it went back to Frederick Taylor era management principles. But here's the point of it: the clubs you're in, whether it's Cats, Crystal Palace, and I forget there was another one perhaps, and then Sutton and Chain, you can move the cheese of the RSGB just like clubs in the States have done with ARL to some degree. How do you do that? You give an award. There is a Young Ham of the Year award that was cobbled together by some hams. They got CQ magazine involved eventually because CQ would look good. I mean, that's the way it is. They give a ham. They give an award. It's given out at a regional rally or ham fest here in Huntsville, Alabama, and I'm usually there. And that's been a great springboard. It really gets a lot of fanfare to those young people. And so people like Joe, when he was younger, here you've got somebody who may be a couple of years older than you. You say, wow, they've been embraced. They've been helped. One of them, Marty Soloway, has been invited by K3LR of DX Engineering to go on some of these DX expeditions and things. So, Dave, one thing you could do as a club, hey, maybe the group of clubs meeting now, you come together and decide we're going to give a UK Young Ham of the Year award. You see what you can do, you do it. I promise you the RSGB will take note. You help move their cheese by doing it yourself. That's just a thought. And we've got a model over here in the States. If you wanted to just Google Young Ham of the Year, one of the guys on Ham Nation, Don Wilbanks, is one of the movers and shakers there. And so you already got a template. You can take it and modify it. But do it. You're at that part of the circuit design where, your inductance or capacitance or resistance, as the case may be, can make a difference in the performance of that overall circuit. So more power to you in doing that.
Thanks a lot.
John, I picked on you a minute ago about the dark light. That's how I like to be. Did you have something to say?
Well, now I've got to get the thing to work. This is the first time I've been on Zoom, so it's all rather new for me. I'd say to you, Frank, that I only came into amateur radio some 3 years ago, so it's all very new to me. It has been a source of concern to me, though, the general lack of interest to the subject. Now, I totally agree with everything you've been saying here this evening. It's very, very interesting in the way that you put it across. It is a bit of a worry that it would appear that there are not many young people interested in amateur radio these days. But it's an interesting point that you make, that, of course, if we don't have accurate statistics on the kind of age groups of people joining the amateur radio fraternity, then we really don't know what level of new people are coming in and how long the amateur radio is likely to last for. I sincerely wouldn't like to see it come to an end. You mentioned about clubs and the kind of clickiness in some clubs, and Richard made the comment about the difficulties with clubs. I've been a member of different clubs, nothing to do with radio, for various types of clubs. I won't go over the details of that. And it can be very, very clicky, and you then suddenly realise that the thinking I have is, how can you call yourself a club if you're not friendly and inviting? I turned up 3 years ago to do my training for Foundation, and it was a Saturday morning. I turned up to the Sutton and Sheen Club, and Neil and Martin were there setting up. And I had no idea if I was in the right place. I'd walked down to the back of the Scout Hall and such like where it was. And I walked in, and these two guys there, and I just said, am I in the right place? They were so warm and friendly, and that set the scene. I mean, I think the Sutton and Sheen Club is one of the best clubs that I've ever been a member of. They're so friendly, they are so helpful. I just before Christmas finally did my advanced exam. That's in about 3 years. I only joined to do the Foundation exam, and because of the encouragement and help that I've had from the guys in the Sutton and Sheen Club, I find myself now with an advanced qualification. It was never my plan to do so, but I just feel that it would be nice if there were more clubs out there like that. It doesn't take much effort. We've got friendly guys from the top, that's Martin down, and like everything else in life, things work best if you've got people at the top who know the ideas and work at things in the right way. And Sutton and Sheen have got the right way of doing things. It would be really, really interesting, Frank, to see what the statistics. I'd certainly, for one, be very interested to find out what the statistics are worldwide and in Europe and various countries as to the age group, the average age group, as you said, and what kind of level of youngsters we're getting joining the amateur radio.
I'm going to disappoint you, and it's unfortunate, but I kind of made this. We don't have a clue about an accurate average age, median age distribution. I was able to get the ARL to share with me their membership data. Most will volunteer their birthday because you get an incentive, like a free book or something. Fork over your birthday, you get a free book. I'm hearing some laughter. You know what I mean. And I spend my $10 off every year in December. So that's not perfect. And keep in mind, there's about 150,000 members of the ARL out of the 750,000 license holders. And this is what I'm saying, John, the sad reality is we simply don't have the data. Now, in talking with Chris a little bit, I know Ofcom releases a list to the RSGB. I gave a talk to the Dale and Denby Club, and Nick Bradley. I made this offer, and I'll make it to you. I said, look, Nick, if you can figure out getting the call book data, and Chris has told me that many people tick the box to say I don't want to share my address. I don't know if that includes no postal code or what have you. One of the things I taught for years, I've been doing geographic information systems since the early 80s. And so I was so old doing that when they developed professional GIS status, they said I didn't need to take the test because I taught most everybody on the examining committee. So I said, look, we'll get that. I'll geocode them as best I can down to street address or postcode or what have you. Put where your club is located, and we'll look at where if you'll share with me the call signs of your club membership roster, just the call signs. I'll put them on maps. We do this. I've done this as a consultant. I've taught people in schools of business how to do the draw area for your market. Hospitals do it all the time, see where their patients come from, what's the catchment area. And it would be good for clubs. I've done that in the U.S. for a number of clubs. Well, I know from that there are people who drive up to 30 miles in the U.S. to attend the club meeting, passing by several other clubs. Why? I think John hit it on the head. Some are friendly, some are not. And so about 30 miles is that polygon around. So if we can even start with the license database and get a handle on my specialty, I said physicist who studies quasars, who studies gamma ray burst. I'm a sociologist, and my PhD is also in statistics, minor in computer science, Joe. So slung a few packets in my day, did some coding, figured out I could get the money to hire people who do head-sound coding every day. It's a lot more efficient. So in that world, we can do that, take that approach and figure out the social ecology, what we call spatial demography, putting people on maps and what's the ecology, where are you drawing from? And then you can see, here's my draw area. Here's 70 people who are licensed who may want to be in our club. Maybe we can contact them. Maybe we can recruit them. Maybe we can do that. So I'll make that offer to the clubs here. Not everybody would want to release their membership roster. I have no business interest in it. I'm just doing it to promote.
Might violate the GDPR.
Well, and the GDPR, I hear that a lot. Colin is love Colin. He's a GPDR Nazi. He wouldn't even share an email someone sent in saying nice things about me. Can't do it, GDPR. Okay, Colin. So, all right. So, point being is, yes, we want to be legal. Yes, we want to be ethical, and we do want to do that. But Ofcom does give. I'm a member of RSGB. Nick ordered it. Well, I ordered it too. But they put it on USB stick. So we'll see where that goes. I've done that here in the States. We have a different situation. It's all public data, and I've geocoded them from 2000 every January slice on up to the present year. Starting there, I'm long-winded, and I apologize, John, but I'm coming back to your question. What I pushed ARL to do is a every other year survey of a high-quality statistical sample, top-down, population down to the sample. Let's get that survey in, and let's ask what year they were born. Then ask them about things indicating activity. There's only 20% of hams who got licenses that are active. We don't know that. And we also don't have common agreement on what being active means. You said you were just going to do a foundation license. Well, that one club said, if you're not a 20 person, you're not one of us. Let's deal with the license database, which is our superset of hams. Real hams at least include those with a valid license. Then you can argue about all the other characteristics. But if we don't start that program, we should. And I will tell you, now, John, you've been in another club. For a technology-focused club, the pilots groups do a lot more than we do. They're kind of technological. They got all those instruments, and they get instrument ratings, and they're regulated by government, too, to be a pilot. And you look at other clubs, other big organizations, and they blow us out of the water, and yet we brag to the world how technologically focused. And, we ought to get in the game a little better so we can give better service to our hobby if we want it to grow. Because, John, we simply don't know the answer. We've got some opt-in surveys that may be spot on, but you don't know statistically how they generalize. They have what we call internal validity, but they don't have that external validity. I've done some of them here at the Delta Division. But I embrace your enthusiasm, John. I can see it in your eyes after looking at it classes of students for 45 years. I can almost see, if you will, the smoke of an idea coming out, and I appreciate your enthusiasm. And for another late in life ham, I've been licensed about 10 years. I appreciate the enthusiasm you have, because that, when you go to a club meeting and you have at least one person who has the enthusiasm for the hobby that you have, it's infectious. It may be more infectious than coronavirus, who knows, but it just takes a few to spark. We talk about, an inductor, moving a magnet through a coil that generates a current. Well, that's a social circuit for someone just like you. You generate that activity. So,
thank you, Frank. I appreciate that.
Thanks, John, and we'll pay for the kind words later. Thank you. As anybody else, I see a few people have come off mute. Has anybody else got any questions for Frank or any points they want to make?
Guys, I want to thank you very much for inviting me. As I said at the outset, it's a real honor. Anytime someone will spend some time to listen to you and also to engage with you, it's a real treat. And so I always felt like at the end of a semester, I'd tell students, you may want your money back after I say this, but I may have learned more from you than you learned from me. Because if you'll listen to the questions you're asked about something, it helps you shape that. So thank you once again. And I'll try to get you a good speaker. I may be able to get Bob Howell to do one, Chris. I happen to know he owes me a favor and he's available.
Well, thank you, Frank. Frank, look, that's been amazing. You spent a lot of time with us tonight. You've made some really good points, lots of information you passed there. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Frank, for spending that time with us and passing on your expertise there. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Take care.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, we'd like to thank Frank Howell, K4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel there, for the feature this episode, The Futures of Ham Radio. And that, as Martin was saying there, is a recording that was conducted from a presentation Frank done recently. So I know the audio quality is a little bit out, but loads of great content, guys, and really hope you enjoyed what Frank said there. And certainly, Dad, some interesting food for thought as we continue to think about the hobby and how it may change into the future.
Yeah, I agree with you, son. I agree with you. And Frank and I talked at length afterwards, and yeah, it was good. Frank's asked me to do a bit of work. Hopefully I'll get around to doing it fairly soon. He's got other ideas in the plan. So all in all, it was an experiment. It was an experiment of, we have a good piece of audio, effectively good content audio. Let's see. And this one's going to be a long one, or has been a long one, I should say.
True. Hey, but as we always say, we have space. If we've got content that's worthwhile, we get it out there to yourselves and let you listen away. And certainly during these times, I'm sure you appreciate, say, some content that isn't anything about the doom and gloom of the world and what you can and can't do. Better to talk about what you can do, as I say. Right, well, we've got some people to thank this episode, our donors. They keep us advert free and show their value for the show. And we'd like to thank Kevin Sturshock, November 3 Kilo Alpha, Michael Street, Golf 3 Juliet Kilo, Billy Kemp, and Lizzie Cannon, Golf 0 Mike Delta Lima, all for your donations and subscriptions that you've set up. Many thanks for doing that for us. We really do appreciate it. As mentioned at the top of the show, this money that you send us to show your value for the show is spent on the show, and we're going to be forwarding some audio kit to some of our presenters to help increase the audio on the show, and we'll get that to them as quick as we can, and certainly tweak those things along. So thank you very much for doing that for us. As always, we'd like to thank the guys who joined you, Dad, on the round table. So we've got Chris, Mike 0, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0, Sierra Golf Lima, Ed, DD5 Lima Papa, Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and Bill, Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, for coming along and joining us on the show day. Still a bit weird, Bill's new call sign. It'll take a little bit long getting used to, but certainly a very cool sign there. As always, you can keep in touch with what we're up to over the coming days by sign up to our e-newsletter. Just go to icqpodcast.com and join there for the latest news information. between the shows. And of course the Facebook group, and you can follow us on Twitter at Colin Butler and at M1MRB. Again, ways of getting those news informations in for you from there. Now, we mention always, as I say, our YouTube channel, which gets you to see us in our beauty glory on video, and that can be found at youtube.com/ICQ podcast. So there's the video there still of the visit we done to the Radio Communications Museum in Derby last year, and we'll also be popping up a video that you made, Dad, on your Mayflower rebuild as well in the coming days. So as I say, pop along there to check that out, and you're more than welcome to view those things from there. Right, just going for the listings here, ticking all the boxes that we have to thank people, and of course we come to the most important part of this, Dad, where we check in with you, make sure that we've covered all the bases with yourself before we send you off to find a chocolate biscuit and make Mum a cup of tea.
Yeah, no problems at all, Colin. Well, as I say, this short video, and the video is only about 3 minutes long, on just some pictures and a little bit of video of this valve radio I restored. And in fairness, I've talked about it many times on the podcast over the last few weeks, so I thought I'd put a short video together on that one. Not a lot happening here, Colin. We're still working. There's kind of interesting things going on all the time. I'm hopefully going to try and get out and fix Foundation Licenses antenna today. And I've got other things to do. And we'll also make your mum a cup of tea and find her a chocolate biscuit. So, that's what I'm up to, Colin.
Nice one. Well, look, I'll let you be with that. And as I say, continue to stay safe. And obviously, everyone else, stay safe too. Look after yourselves, your families, and obviously your club mates and the hobby. And as always, guys, we'll do this all again in a fortnight's time. 73's all.
Yeah, 73.
you.